Chapter 2468. As millions of spiritual lights merged into the world, Luo Shui completely disappeared. From then on, there was no such person in the world. Silence was restored in the cave. Ji Tianqing stood below the high platform in a daze. His expression was complicated, and his heart was heavy and sorrowful. He had never thought that everything was developing in a good direction. He had already seen the dawn of hope, but in the end, he was greeted with such a painful blow. In his mind, he could not help but recall the various things that happened between him and Luo Shui in his previous life. Countless scenes flashed through his mind like flashes of lightning. At that time he was as cold as an iceberg and as unromantic as a block of wood. He was only grateful for Luo Shui's help and treated her as a trustworthy friend. Therefore, after he became a god, he would guide and help Luo Shui. Although he also knew that Luo Shui had always had feelings for him and silently accompanied him. However, he had no romantic feelings for Luo Shui. What he yearned for was the vast starry sky, the supreme path of godhood, the ultimate meaning of martial arts and life. The only thing he did not have was romantic love. Therefore, when he left the Five Elements world and ascended to the upper realm, he did not think of taking Luo Shui with him. However, he did not expect that after his rebirth in this life, Luo Shui still did not change her heart. She endured the torment of longing alone, swallowed the bitter fruit that she had created, and sacrificed her life to end all of this. In the end, it evolved into such an outcome. Sigh. The ill-fated relationship of the previous life, the debt of this life. Ji Tianqing sighed silently, feeling a little sad. After all, Luo Shui did not let him down in the slightest. She did not cross the line, abandon her conscience, and hurt him, Yunyao, and the two children. At this point it was useless to say anything more. What will come sooner or later. Fate always plays tricks on people. Perhaps the choice she made was the best result. This thought flashed through his mind. Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and walked to the top of the high platform. At the same time, Yunyao's consciousness gradually blurred and she fainted. Luo Shui's soul and memories were completely integrated into her soul, and the two were quickly fusing. This had a great impact on Yunyao's soul, causing her to fall into a coma. Ji Tianqing quickly arrived in front of her and looked at her worriedly, releasing his divine sense to check her situation. Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that she was not injured and that the two children were safe and sound. He hurriedly used a secret technique to deactivate the many divine formations on the high platform. Soon, the hundreds of rope-like divine lights were withdrawn. Swish! Swish! After the divine light dissipated, Yunyao was freed and regained her freedom. Her divine power circulated naturally, protecting her mind and divine soul. This way, her divine soul would fuse with Luo Shui's divine soul and Goddess Yaoguang's memories, and her life would not be in danger. She sat motionlessly on the high platform with her eyes closed. Her body was glowing with a faint white light. Ji Tianqing knew that this process would not be short and would take a long time. Therefore, he sat beside Yunyao and silently protected her. 3 days passed in a flash. That evening, on the ancient viewing platform, a graceful woman with a head of white hair wearing an ivory white dress was standing by the jade railing, quietly looking at the sea of clouds in front of her. She was Fairy Yu Qing. Even though she had changed into clean and tidy clothes and combed her hair, she did not look any different. However, her injuries had not healed. There were still numerous wounds all over her body, and her strength was also quite weak. She looked at the sea of clouds that flowed quietly in the sky and sighed with a bleak expression. Sigh. Luo Shui, you are still the silly girl that I know. No matter how firm your attitude was before, no matter how decisive you were, you are still a kind person. You could not cross your conscience and bottom line, so you still sacrificed yourself to help them. Oh, if I had known this would happen, how could I have let you go to this step? Fairy Yu Qing sighed to herself, her tone sorrowful and bleak. Gusts of cold wind blew, blowing at her waist-length white hair and clothes, adding to her desolate aura. At this time, a black-robed figure appeared in the sky above the ancient viewing platform and gradually became clear. The tall and burly black-robed man was the messenger of the divine ruins. There is no kindness on the path to immortality, and the 9 heavens are the most ruthless. Is it the 7 emotions and 6 desires that cause people to fall, Or is it only by severing emotions that one can ascend to heaven? The messenger of the divine ruins muttered in a bleak tone. His voice was low and hoarse, but it had the charm of seeing through the prosperity of the world, and his heart was as calm as water. "You're here." Fairy Yuqing did not turn around. She was still facing the sea of clouds and greeted him. The messenger of the divine ruins did not respond. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Your most beloved disciple died because of him. Do you hate him?" Fairy Yuqing shook her head and said calmly, "This is Luo Shui's own choice. I have no right to hate him." The messenger of the divine ruins nodded slightly and asked again, "This matter is over. What are you going to do?" Fairy Yuqing smiled bitterly and said desolately, "Naturally, I will return to the heavenly sea, stay in jade-clear heaven, and wait for the end of my life to return to heaven and earth." "Are you really going to extinguish the last glimmer of hope?" The messenger of the divine ruins asked in a playful tone. "That little girl has inherited everything of the ancient goddess. Perhaps in 10 years she will be able to break the seal and change heaven and earth?" Fairy Yuqing was stunned for a moment. After a long silence she replied, "If that's the case, then you and I both have a chance to leave this cage. Perhaps we don't have to turn into bones and sand. But don't forget, now that the continent is being invaded by foreign enemies, it's unknown whether she can withstand this calamity." The messenger of the divine ruin said in a playful tone, "Perhaps you and I can join forces and help her. It can be considered as seeking a chance of survival for us and for this world?" Fairy Yuqing smiled playfully and asked, "You and I are both otherworldly people. How can we interfere in the grudges of the world?" "Otherworldly people," the messenger of the divine ruin said in a self-deprecating tone, "being trapped here and not even having the right to leave, how can you talk about being otherworldly? Moreover, this is not a grudge of the human world, but an invasion of foreign enemies. I think this should be an opportunity." Pausing for a moment, he said in a serious and solemn tone, "Last chance." Fairy Yuqing frowned and remained silent. After a long time, when the figure of the messenger of the divine ruins gradually blurred and was about to disappear, she nodded slightly and said, "In that case, I will believe you this time." The figure of the messenger of the divine ruins became clear again and his tone was filled with relief. He nodded and said, "That's good. Then you don't have to return to the heavenly sea, just wait here. I have already deduced the secrets of heaven and predicted the future. Within 3 days the great calamity will descend. At that time life and death will depend on this." End of chapter. Chapter 2469. Within 3 days. The Great Tribulation is coming. Even though Fairy Yuqing's heart was as calm as still water, she could not help but change her expression. She had never thought that the Great Tribulation would come so quickly. However, she knew that the old man of the divine ruins had to consume his lifespan when he used a secret technique to pry into the secrets of the heavens. The results and future that he deduced were not absolutely correct, but they were not far from the truth. The messenger of the divine ruins nodded slightly and said earnestly, "So you only have 3 days left. Heal your injuries as soon as possible." After saying that, he turned and left, disappearing into the sky. Fairy Yuqing frowned slightly. After thinking for a moment, she sat on the ancient viewing platform and began to heal her injuries. 3 days passed quickly. During this period of time, Ji Tianxing had been guarding by Yunyao's side, not leaving her side at all. Yunyao had also been unconscious. The two souls in her mind were still fusing quickly. Her entire body was still shining with a dense white light. As her aura continued to strengthen, it also became more mysterious. Ji Tianxing saw that her condition was stable and there was no danger, so he was relieved and at ease. It was already noon. The sky around the ancient viewing platform was covered by dark clouds and was as dark as ever. Suddenly the wind blew in the sky. A biting cold wind blew in from the south, bringing with it a vast expanse of gray clouds, rolling towards the north. The cold wind was bone-piercingly cold and violent. It even carried a trace of faintly discernible killing intent. After a while, the gray clouds in the sky thousands of miles around the ancient viewing platform were blown away. The sun shone down from the sky, but it was not warm at all. Swoosh! Suddenly, a black light lit up in the sky in the south. It streaked across the sky like lightning and sped towards the ancient viewing platform. In the blink of an eye, the black light arrived near the ancient viewing platform and stopped. After the black light faded, a huge pitch-black battleship with a ferocious appearance appeared. This battleship was thousands of feet long and emitted a cold killing intent and an invisible suppressive force. There were several patterns engraved on the side of the battleship. They were mysterious and not complicated, but they exuded a domineering and majestic aura. Without a doubt, this was the battleship of the Heaven Slayer race. Crack! Crack! With a crisp sound of metal clashing, the door of the battleship opened. A tall pitch-black figure stepped out of the cabin door. It was a huge half-human, half-beast monster. His entire body was as black as ink, and his body was covered in black scales. 2 balls of purple flames danced in his large eyes. The most eye-catching thing was the 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders. They were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, looking extremely ferocious. With such a unique physique and appearance, no matter which world it was in, it would attract attention and leave a deep impression. Clearly, he was the leader of the heaven-conquering army, the dragon-subduing general. Following closely behind General Dragon Subduing was a demon race expert who was 20 feet tall and was covered in black dragon scales. This person was wearing a sturdy and heavy black armor. He had a bald head covered in tattoos, and he held a pitch-black demonic blade in his wide hand. His eyes were like copper bells, flashing with a frightening cold light. His entire body was emitting a powerful and domineering demonic aura. Even though he was following closely behind General Dragon Fu, his aura and posture were obviously weaker than General Dragon Fu's. But if General Dragon Fu was not present, he would be the most domineering existence present. This newly ascended demon god was the former great demon saint Ling Xian. Other than General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian, there were 8 other heaven-conquering army captains in silver armor who walked out of the cabin door in succession. They were like 8 loyal guards, following closely behind General Dragon Fu. Swoosh! General Dragon Fu stepped out of the battleship and came to the sky above the ancient viewing platform. He looked down at the ancient viewing platform from above, and his gaze landed on Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing had long seen the battleship approaching and had sensed the dangerous aura. She had already ended her cultivation. She still sat on the platform with a calm expression, looking indifferently at General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The 2 parties stared at each other for a moment, not revealing any hostility or killing intent. But the atmosphere between heaven and earth quietly became oppressive. Even the air seemed to have frozen. General Dragon Fu finally spoke. He asked Fairy Yuqing in broken human language, "I see the shadow and aura of Luo Shui martial god on you. What is your relationship with Luo Shui martial god?" For nearly 3,000 years, Luo Shui had been known as the #1 beauty of the Shenwu continent. Her appearance and temperament were unparalleled. However, in the era 6,000 years ago, Fairy Yuqing had also been a peerless fairy who had swept the world and attracted the hearts of millions of men. Even though she was now old and in her twilight years, her beauty was still unparalleled, and her temperament was elegant and outstanding. Fairy Yuqing glanced at General Dragon Fu and said calmly, "I am Luo Shui's master. If I'm not wrong, you must be General Dragon Fu of the Heaven-Conquering Army, right?" General Dragon Fu was stunned and said in surprise, "Luo Shui's master? She actually has a master? And she's still alive." Ling Xian, who was standing behind him, quickly explained, "General, you may not know this, but according to the rumors circulating in my clan, Luo Shui does indeed have a master. However, her master was a peerless fairy from 5,000 years ago. Later on, she lived in seclusion overseas and never cared about worldly affairs. Looking at this white-haired woman's strength and appearance, she should be Luo Shui's master." General Dragon Fu nodded slightly and stared coldly at Fairy Yuqing. He sneered, "A person who lives in seclusion who doesn't care about worldly affairs has actually appeared here and guessed my identity. It looks like Luo Shui has already told you. Let me ask you, where is Luo Shui hiding? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll kill you as a sacrifice." Fairy Yuqing looked at him expressionlessly and said slowly, "Luo Shui has already fallen and returned to the heavens and earth. She didn't tell me anything about you. It's just that you're so ugly, and in the entire Shenwu continent, you can't find a monster as ugly as you. That's why I was able to guess your identity with a single glance." Her tone was very calm, without the slightest bit of anger, as if she was stating a fact. However, the more she was like this, the angrier General Dragon Fu became, and his eyes surged with killing intent. "Old woman, you're challenging my bottom line. Are you courting death? Speak quickly. Where is Luo Shui?" Fairy Yuqing spoke again. "I've already said that she has already fallen and returned to the heavens and earth." "Impossible." General Dragon Subduing didn't believe this news at all. He shouted coldly without hesitation. Ling Xian also shouted angrily, "Old woman, you still have the nerve to say such a clumsy lie?" Luo Shui was one of the 3 martial gods. Besides General Dragon Fu, who else could have killed her? Fairy Yuqing shook her head lightly and said indifferently, "When did I say that she was killed? She killed herself." Hearing this, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian both frowned and looked at each other doubtfully. End of chapter. Chapter 2470. A few days ago, General Long Fu had used a secret technique to detect that there were powerful fluctuations of divine power in the ruins of God. He knew that martial god Tianju had been killed, and the ancestral god fiend had also fallen. Martial god Taihao had been severely injured and must have hidden away to recuperate. There were only a few martial gods left in the Xunwu continent. Therefore, the fluctuations of divine power in the ruins of God were most likely related to Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Therefore, General Long Fu had brought Ling Xian and the other captains to the ruins of God as quickly as possible. This time he wanted to kill Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui in the ruins of God to completely end the war. As long as Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui were dead, no one would be able to resist the invasion and rule of the Heaven Punisher. General Long Fu was here to fight. However, he had not expected to see Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui after arriving at the ruins of God. Instead, he saw a white-haired woman. The white-haired woman claimed to be Luo Shui's master, and said that Luo Shui had committed suicide. General Long Fu could not accept this result. He temporarily suppressed his anger and killing intent and stared at Fairy Yuqing with a sharp gaze. He continued to ask, "Old woman, I'll ask you one more thing. Where is Ji Tianqing? This is your last chance. If you hide anything from me, kill me." Fairy Yuqing glanced at him, and the corners of her mouth curled into a contemptuous sneer. She slowly stood up and said indifferently, "I don't know Ji Tianqing, so how would I know where he is?" After getting this answer, General Long Fu's patience was exhausted, and he truly wanted to kill her. "Very good. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." With that, General Long Fu waved his hand and ordered, "Kill her." The 8 silver-armored captains drew their swords and sabers. After roaring, they pounced toward Fairy Yuqing with murderous intent. Swish! 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 Everyone attacked from all directions. At the same time, they waved their swords and sabers, slashing out bloody blades that blotted out the sky and earth, releasing an invisible pressure. Suddenly, the ancient viewing platform with a radius of 5 kilometers was drowned in the light of swords and sabers. Fairy Yuqing was under the light blades that filled the sky. She was under great pressure and her eyes became solemn. Even though the captains were only at the 2nd or 3rd level of the martial god realm, they were still able to defeat the captains. Usually, Fairy Yuqing did not take them seriously at all. She could easily defeat and kill them. However, there were as many as 8 captains and their teamwork was flawless. In addition, Fairy Yuqing had not recovered from her serious injuries and only had about 60% of her strength left. Faced with the full power of the 8 captains, she had no choice but to be cautious and give it her all. She didn't hold back at all. She summoned the sea god's shield without hesitation and poured her divine power into it. Instantly, the sea god's shield expanded to the size of a mountain, releasing an icy blue radiance that soared into the sky. Bang 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 bang. The crimson blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth viciously struck the sea god's shield, resulting in a series of earth-shattering booms. The divine shield trembled unceasingly. Cold light burst out and emitted a dull buzzing sound. However, the 8 captains were unable to break through the divine shield's defense, even after several consecutive attacks. Under the protection of the divine shield, Fairy Yuqing was safe and sound. She formed hand seals with both hands and activated the sea god's shield to spin rapidly. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The spikes and blades at the edge of the divine shield immediately released thousands of icy blue light blades and spears, piercing fiercely toward the 8 captains. Instantly, the icy blue light exploded and tore through the sky, dazzling and eye-catching. Faced with such a powerful attack, the 8 captains' expressions were solemn as they desperately waved their swords and sabers to block. Boom, 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 boom. Another deafening boom erupted, reverberating endlessly in the sky. Although the 8 captains joined forces to block the light blades and ice spears, they were under great pressure. However, the pressure on them was extremely great, and they were all shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. Some of them were even injured, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Seeing this scene, General Dragon Subduing frowned and said coldly, "Damn old woman. She is indeed stronger than Luo Shui." Obviously, it was difficult for the 8 captains to complete their mission, let alone kill Fairy Yuqing. Thus, General Dragon Subduing ordered the battleship high in the sky. Fire the cannons and turn her into ashes. There were 6 captains and dozens of heaven-punishing race warriors guarding the battleship. After receiving the order, everyone immediately activated the battleship's array formation. The metal plate on the side of the battleship opened, revealing a row of black cannon muzzles. Dark red light lit up in them, brewing a power that could destroy the world. Boom! In the next moment, the hundreds of cannon muzzles suddenly spewed out dark red flames that were as red as blood. The blood-red divine flames condensed into hundreds of light pillars that fiercely blasted toward Fairy Yuqing on the ancient viewing platform. Instantly, the world within 1,000 miles was illuminated by the flames. A destructive aura enveloped the entire area, erupting with an unparalleled oppressive force. Fairy Yuqing, who was on the ancient viewing platform, felt a great pressure and danger. Her eyes were filled with shock and anger. She had a faint premonition that with her strength and the sea god's shield, she would not be able to block the bombardment of the battleship. Hundreds of blood-red light pillars descended from the sky and were about to drown Fairy Yuqing. At this critical moment, a burly black figure suddenly appeared in the sky and let out a deep and majestic roar. "How dare you behave so atrociously in my territory? You must be tired of living." The burly black-robed man was the messenger of the divine ruins. He raised his arms and waved his wide sleeves. His right palm was like a blade as it slashed toward the sky. Boom! In an instant, a dazzling white divine light ruthlessly split open the sky, creating a pitch-black crack that was hundreds of miles long. And this huge spatial crack was right above the ancient viewing platform. The hundreds of blood-red light pillars were blocked by the spatial crack. They fiercely blasted into the pitch-black void and disappeared on the spot. Immediately after, the messenger of the divine ruins waved his left palm and sent out a golden divine light that covered the sky and earth. It turned into 8 divine dragon phantoms that blasted toward the 8 silver-armored captains. Boom, 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 boom. With a series of muffled sounds, the 8 captains were caught off guard and were all blasted away by the divine dragon phantoms. They spat out mouthfuls of blood. All of this took a long time to describe, but it happened in the blink of an eye. As soon as the messenger of the divine ruins appeared, he only used 2 moves to resolve Fairy Yuqing's crisis and injured the 8 captains. General Long Fu and Ling Xian were stunned for a moment. They turned to look at the messenger of the divine ruins at the same time, their eyes filled with caution. Without a doubt, both of them could see that the messenger of the divine ruins' strength and methods were stronger than Fairy Yuqing's. Fairy Yuqing came back to her senses and looked at the messenger of the divine ruins with a complicated gaze. She asked, "Old man, you clearly hid your strength before. You deliberately let me win?" A few months ago, she had brought Luo Shui to the divine ruins and defeated the messenger of the divine ruins, allowing Luo Shui to enter the cemetery of the gods. This made her think that her strength was slightly stronger than the messenger of the divine ruins. But now she realized that the truth was not what she thought. End of chapter. Chapter 2471. Fairy Yuqing and the messenger of the divine ruins had known each other for thousands of years. At that time their relationship was neither close nor far. There was no grudge between them, nor was there a deep friendship between them. Until thousands of years later, the few remaining martial gods of that era passed away one after another. The 2 of them became the oldest and only 2 surviving martial gods. From then on, there was a sense of mutual appreciation between the two of them. Now that Fairy Yuqing understood the truth, she guessed the messenger of the divine ruin's thoughts. He had long been unwilling to be trapped here, and wanted to unlock the world seal to find a chance to ascend to the upper realm. Thinking of this, Fairy Yuqing looked at the messenger of the divine ruins with a complicated expression. She thought to herself, this old fellow deliberately hid his strength and had the idea of leaving the cage long ago. He must have made preparations long ago. He has guarded the divine ruins for thousands of years, and most likely obtained some benefits from the divine ruins. It's either a divine Tao inheritance or a divine artifact. Just as Fairy Yuqing was guessing, General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian attacked. The two of them used their ultimate skills at the same time and punched out dozens of bloody fist shadows, releasing overwhelming demonic fire that poured toward the messenger of the divine ruins. The messenger of the divine ruins hurriedly waved his palms and punched out palm shadows that collided with the dozens of fist shadows, creating a series of earth-shattering sounds. Bam! 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 Following a muffled explosion, the sky was shattered, revealing a large expanse of black space. The demonic fire that covered the sky drowned the messenger of the divine ruins like a flood. However, the black robe that the messenger of the divine ruins was wearing lit up with a dazzling sacred golden light, protecting him like a shield. No matter how much the demonic fire attacked, it could not hurt him at all. Seeing this scene, Fairy Yuqing was enlightened and muttered to herself, I didn't notice it before, but now it seems that the black robe he's wearing is a divine artifact. General Dragon Subduing also frowned, and a cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. The messenger of the divine ruins is actually so powerful? He can stand shoulder to shoulder with me? He suddenly turned his head and looked at Ling Xian beside him. Ling Xian, why didn't you say so earlier? Ling Xian explained awkwardly, Lord General, please calm down. I have never come into contact with the emissary of the ruins of God before, so I do not know his true strength. Dragon Subduing General glared at him angrily but didn't say anything. After that, General Dragon Subduing sent a voice transmission to the captain and soldiers on the warship. Leave this place immediately and search for Luo Shui and Ji Tianqing. Upon receiving his order, the warship immediately flew away and began to search the surrounding mountains. The Dragon Subduing General and Ling Xian joined forces to attack the emissary of the divine ruins. The 8 silver-armored captains regained their composure and attacked Fairy Yuqing with all their might. The two sides fought fiercely high in the sky, and it was difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. At the same time, several thousand li away from the ancient viewing platform, in the cave deep underground, Yun Yao was still sleeping. Her soul was still fusing. Ji Tianqing stayed by her side, quietly waiting for her to complete the fusion. But at this moment, divine power fluctuations came from outside the cave, accompanied by deafening explosions. The cave's protective array shook from the shockwaves and lit up with dazzling divine light. Ji Tianqing was immediately awakened. He quickly got up and left the cave. He quietly flew out of the ground and hid in the sky. In the direction of the ancient viewing platform, layers of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples. There were also loud rumbles and explosions that continued. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. With a gloomy expression, he muttered, It's a battle between martial gods. Not only are there martial gods of the heaven punishing race, there are also demon gods. Of course, he could see that there was demonic chi and bloody light in the soaring divine light thousands of li away. The continuous divine power fluctuations also contained the aura of the heaven punishing race. Ji Tianqing immediately realized that the experts of the heaven punishing race and the ancestor demon god had come. However, he was filled with doubts and thought to himself, the ancestor demon god is still alive? He was severely injured by my divine sword. Even if he was lucky enough to survive, he would be extremely weak. How could he recover his strength and make a comeback in such a short period of time? How could he be together with the martial gods of the heaven punishing race? Even though Ji Tianqing racked his brains, he could not figure out the truth and reason. Therefore, he quietly flew across the sky and decided to go to the ancient viewing platform to see what was going on. However, he had only flown 1,000 li when he saw a black shadow as large as a mountain speeding toward him from the side. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, The 3,000-meter-long black shadow flew past him and headed straight for the mountain peak where Yunyao was. The heaven-punishing race's battleship? Look at the symbol and insignia of the battleship. Could it be General Fu Long's battleship? Although the battleship was fast, it could not escape Ji Tianqing's detection. He turned around without hesitation and chased after the battleship. A moment later, when he caught up to the battleship, it had also stopped above the mountain. Obviously, the captains on the battleship had used divine arrays and special methods to detect the divine arrays in caves underground. The battleship stopped in the sky. After a moment of hesitation, it opened the metal deck on the side, revealing a row of black cannon muzzles. Hundreds of cannon muzzles were aimed at the underground cave, and dark red light was brewing in them. The cave where Yunyao was about to be bombarded by the battleship. Once the light pillars came down, a deep pit with a radius of a few hundred li would be blasted into the ground. The underground cave would also be greatly damaged. Yunyao would definitely be affected and her life would be in danger. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing stepped forward without hesitation. He waved the burial of heaven and slashed out a sword light that was thousands of li long. Sky-splitting sword. The giant golden sword that was thousands of li long struck the giant battleship with endless power. With a loud boom, the huge warship was sent flying on the spot, tumbling hundreds of miles away. The giant golden sword shattered on the spot, bursting into golden fragments that covered the sky and scattered in the sky. The battleship was sent flying hundreds of li away before it dissipated the impact and stopped in the sky. There was a 3-inch deep dent in the battleship that was about 100 meters long where the giant sword had struck it. This was only a light injury to the battleship. It would not affect its normal operation or battle. The captains on the warship and the many soldiers of the Heaven Punisher race were still in a state of shock and fear. Everyone looked at Ji Tianqing in the sky. When they saw his appearance, they immediately cried out in surprise. "It's Ji Tianqing. That's right, it's him. Ha ha ha. Lord General guessed correctly. Ji Tianqing is really here. Kill him. Kill him quickly, and we'll be able to obtain the greatest merit. Everyone, don't be rash. That kid is very powerful. He can even kill the ancestral fiend god. Our top priority is to report this to the general." End of chapter. Chapter 2472. The captains had different opinions. Some people were wild with joy. They only wanted to kill Ji Tianqing immediately and obtain the first-class merit. Some were cautious and suggested reporting the news to the dragon-subduing general first. However, they quickly finished their discussion and reached a consensus. One of the captains sent a message to the dragon-subduing general. The other 3 captains controlled the battleship and released hundreds of blood-colored light pillars towards Ji Tianqing. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, hundreds of light pillars shot out like a rainbow that streaked across the sky and enveloped Ji Tianqing's figure. The captains were all confident and full of anticipation as they stared at the sky without blinking. They thought that no matter how strong Ji Tianqing was, he wouldn't be able to block the bombardment of the dragon-subduing battleship. However, the next scene made everyone dumbfounded. When the blood-colored light pillars engulfed Ji Tianqing, his figure disappeared into thin air. He had become one with the vast heaven and earth. His aura was still in this heaven and earth, but his divine body no longer existed. It was as if he was the heaven and earth and the heaven and earth were him. Boom! The hundreds of blood-colored light pillars missed and slammed into the barren land, creating an earth-shattering explosion. Instantly, 2 mountains that were thousands of feet tall were blasted into powder. The ground within a 500-mile radius was also blasted into a huge pit like an abyss. Endless smoke and dust rose into the air, obscuring the sky and the sun. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, causing the ground within a radius of 3,000 miles to tremble. Such destructive power was truly terrifying. However, the captains knew that this attack had missed and didn't hurt Ji Tianqing. Even the cave they had discovered earlier wasn't damaged. After all, that cave was a few hundred miles away from the huge pit. The captains looked at each other. For the time being, they were at a loss of what to do. That brat Ji Tianqing is hiding. What should we do? Find a way to find him? Why don't we ignore Ji Tianqing and destroy that cave first? Yes, there's something strange about that cave. It must be related to Ji Tianqing. After discussing for a while, everyone immediately came up with an idea. Thus, the battleship flew towards the cave and accumulated a large amount of power, preparing to fire. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing, who was the embodiment of heaven and earth, was instantly enraged. Killing intent surged in his heart. These heaven crushers are despicable and deserve to die. Through observing the reaction of the battleship, he guessed that only the captain of the Heaven Punisher race was on the battleship. General Dragon Subduing was not there. After all, given the dragon subduing general's strength, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. He could just fight him head-on. Soon, the hundreds of cannons on the side of the warship began to accumulate dark red light. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to take out the god-slaying flying dagger. He used his divine psyche to control the flying dagger and stabbed it towards the battleship. Swish! The 3-inch-long god-slaying flying dagger streaked across the sky with a resplendent golden light. In a quarter of an instant, the flying dagger pierced the side of the warship. At this moment, the flying knife suddenly expanded thousands of times, turning into a dark golden giant blade that was hundreds of feet long. Boom! Crack! The dark golden giant blade pierced the side of the battleship. There was an earth-shattering explosion, and black metal shrapnel filled the sky. More than 30 cannons on the side of the battleship were shattered or cut off by the flying dagger. A 100-meter-long gap appeared on the hull of the battleship, and the situation inside could be clearly seen. Ji Tianqing even saw the Heaven Punisher warriors in the battleship through the large gap. Their faces were filled with shock. The berserk and unparalleled force of impact once again sent the warship flying, tumbling tens of li away. The remaining dozens of cannons continued to shoot out dark red light beams. However, the direction of those dozens of light pillars deviated and actually blasted towards the sky. The plan of the captains was once again foiled by Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to attack the battleship. He swung his sword, sending out cold light beams toward the gap in the battleship. At the same time, he used his divine psyche to control the god-slaying flying dagger to attack the battleship from the side. Swish! 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 More than 30 sharp sword lights pierced through the gap in the battleship and pierced into the battleship, accurately piercing a dozen Heaven Punisher warriors. With a series of muffled explosions, the dozen or so Heaven Punishing warriors exploded into clouds of blood mist and disintegrated on the spot. The surviving Heaven Punisher warriors roared in fear and cursed angrily. The captains were also flustered. They hurriedly piloted the battleship to counterattack. However, before they could attack, Ji Tianqing teleported behind the battleship. Whoosh! The god-slaying flying dagger appeared out of thin air, pierced through the gap in the battleship, and charged into the battleship. Swish! 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 In just a few breaths, the god-slaying flying dagger flew around the battleship and pierced through a dozen metal walls, instantly killing more than 30 Heaven Punisher warriors. Even one of the captains could not dodge in time. His legs were cut off by the god-slaying flying dagger. In an instant, cries of agony filled the battleship, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4 captains could not be bothered to deal with Ji Tianqing. They could only desperately block the god-slaying flying dagger. However, at that moment, Ji Tianqing swung the Burial of Heaven sword again and struck the battleship. Boom! Crack! With a loud boom, the battleship was sent flying 300 miles away. It rolled and crashed into a valley. Boom! With a loud boom, the valley was blasted into a deep abyss. The surrounding mountains were also flattened, leaving behind a scene of desolation. Smoke and dust that covered the sky drifted down and covered the entire battleship. The previously mysterious, majestic, and ferocious battleship was now covered in scars and deformed. At first glance, the 10,000-foot-long battleship looked like scrap metal. The god-slaying flying dagger had basically killed all the Heaven Punisher warriors in the battleship. The remaining 4 captains had also been injured by the god-slaying flying dagger. They were fleeing in panic. They had to accept reality. This battleship with powerful defenses was no longer a safe fortress. Instead, it was a cage that prevented them from escaping and trapped them. Helpless, the 4 captains could only abandon the battleship and flee. Swish! 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 The 4 of them opened the cabin door and fled the battleship. They turned into streaks of blood-red light and flew into the sky. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, who was guarding above the ruins, charged over with his sword. Ha ha ha! I was waiting for you to walk right into my trap. Ji Tianqing sneered. He waved his sword in his right hand and sent out dozens of sword beams. His left hand struck out with a dragon claw as large as a mountain. Bam! 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 3 captains were stabbed by the sword beams. A series of muffled sounds rang out, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4th captain was hit by the illusory dragon claw. He fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. His body cracked open and blood spurted out. Without the protection of the battleship, the 4 captains were immediately severely injured. They were in imminent danger. End of chapter. Chapter 2473. Sword Rain. Ji Tianqing pointed his sword at the sky and shouted coldly. In the next instant, tens of thousands of star swords descended from the sky. The 4 injured silver-armored captains looked up at the meteor-like swords and felt a chill run down their spines. Their eyes were filled with despair. An extremely heavy force suppressed them, giving them no chance to escape. At this critical moment, they could only use their last bit of strength to resist with all their might. Boom! 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 The star swords covered a radius of hundreds of miles and produced earth-shattering sounds. The stars were dazzling and dust filled the sky. The loud sounds were endless, and the ground within thousands of miles was trembling. The 4 silver-armored captains endured the attacks of countless star swords and were quickly reduced to ashes. 10 seconds later, when all the star swords dissipated, the 4 captains also ceased to exist. Without any hesitation, Ji Tianqing rushed into the underground cave as fast as a bolt of lightning. The 2 divine arrays protecting the cave had already been damaged to varying degrees and were not far from being destroyed. Fortunately, the interior of the cave was still intact, and Yunyao was safe. Ji Tianqing hurriedly opened the sword world and put the sleeping Yunyao inside. Only then could Yunyao be considered safe. He turned and left the cave, crossing the sky and flying toward the ancient viewing platform. Dozens of seconds later, Ji Tianqing arrived near the ancient viewing platform. He was still hundreds of miles away, but he could already see the colorful divine light in the distant sky covering thousands of miles. A few figures were flickering in and out of the divine light, shuttling back and forth. Among the 3 people closest to him, one was a tall and burly elder in a black robe. He was the messenger of the divine ruins. As for the other 2, one was the ferocious-looking General Dragon Fu, who was as large as a mountain. There was also a bald man from the demon race. He was the great demon sage Ling Xian, whose appearance had changed greatly. General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian were attacking the messenger of the divine ruins. From the looks of it, the messenger of the divine ruins was at a disadvantage. He was covered in injuries and bloodstains, looking somewhat pathetic. The dragon-subduing general and Ling Xian had the upper hand, but it wasn't easy for them. Both of them had suffered heavy injuries, especially Ling Xian's injuries. In the short term, it would be difficult to determine the victor between the 2 sides. It wasn't an easy task for General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian to kill the emissary of the divine ruins. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, revealing a deep sense of doubt. Why is General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian together? Join forces to deal with the old man of the godly ruins. In a short 2 months, how did Ling Xian break through the deity realm and become a fiend celestial? Ling Xian's divine soul aura was actually very similar to the ancestral devil gods. Could it be that Ling Xian had rescued the ancestral demon god and seized the opportunity when the ancestral demon god was on the brink of death to steal the ancestral demon god's soul? Moreover, after Ling Xian became a demon god, he joined the dragon-subduing general? In a short moment, Ji Tianqing analyzed the answer. In his opinion, this was the only explanation that made sense. However, he still felt that this was too absurd. Ling Xian was the ancestral demon god's most trusted and most valued great fiend celestial, but in the end, he betrayed the ancestral demon god when he was on the brink of death. After that, Ling Xian turned around and joined the dragon-subduing general, making the fiend celestial race a vassal of the heaven punisher race. If the ancestral demon god was still alive, He would probably explode from anger even if he didn't die, right? Ji Tianqing thought to himself, the corners of his mouth curled up in a contemptuous sneer. He looked at the sky thousands of miles away, even further away. There, several captains in silver armor were desperately besieging a white-haired woman. Ji Tianqing's gaze immediately fell on the white-haired woman, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. Of course, he could recognize that the white-haired woman was the assassin who had attacked him previously. Before Luo Shui died, he had revealed the true identity of the white-haired woman. It was actually his master, Fairy Yu Qing. Now Fairy Yu Qing was besieged by several captains of the Heaven Punisher race. Her injuries were very miserable, and she was in a precarious situation. Ji Tianqing could not help but think to himself, if Fairy Yu Qing is willing to help Luo Shui stall for time, it means that she also knows of Luo Shui's plan. However, Luo Shui reined in the horse at the edge of the cliff and sacrificed himself. It has already been a few days, so Fairy Yu Qing must know. But she actually doesn't blame me and doesn't seek revenge? Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing did not hesitate to fly over and help Fairy Yu Qing. Swoosh! He arrived near the battlefield and appeared behind a silver-armored captain in a flash. Before the captain could react, he waved his sword and stabbed out 7 cold beams. Swish! 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 7 dazzling sword beams enveloped the captain like a bright moon. With a muffled bang, the captain was stabbed by the sword beams. His armor and body collapsed at the same time, exploding into a rain of blood. This sudden scene not only frightened the other captains, but also stunned Fairy Yu Qing. When she saw that the person who attacked was Ji Tianqing, she also revealed a trace of surprise and her eyes became complicated. At this moment, the other captains came back to their senses and waved their long sabers and swords, surrounding Ji Tianqing. The pressure on Fairy Yu Qing was greatly reduced. She hurriedly took out a few pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. Ji Tianqing used the Big Dipper Nebula steps and held the Burial of Heaven sword as he fought with the captains. The divine sword danced, constantly stabbing out dazzling sword beams. His left palm flew up and down, constantly striking out palm shadows and dragon claws that blotted out the sky, sending the captains flying one after another. In the dark, the god-slaying flying dagger remained invisible, lurking in the void, ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Bang! 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 Swish! Swish! Loud sounds kept erupting, and the colorful sword beams and palm shadows covered hundreds of miles of the sky. In a short span of 10 breaths, 3 captains had been killed by the Heaven Burier sword, their bodies smashed into pieces. 2 other captains were smashed into meat paste by the heaven-capturing dragon claws and shattered into countless pieces. At this point, the 6 captains who besieged Fairy Yu Qing were all killed by Ji Tianqing. Before Ji Tianqing arrived, Fairy Yu Qing had already killed 2 captains. All 8 captains were dead, and the battle was over. Ji Tianqing held the Burial of Heaven sword and flew to stand in front of Fairy Yu Qing. Fairy Yu Qing looked at him with a calm expression and asked, I attacked you before, but you didn't care about the past and even helped me out? Ji Tianqing looked at her with a complicated gaze and said in a low voice, Senior, Luo Shui has already told me the truth. Fairy Yu Qing nodded slightly and asked again. She couldn't get over herself and chose to sacrifice herself, right? Ji Tianqing nodded silently with a bitter look on his face. Fairy Yu Qing forced a smile and comforted. You don't have to blame yourself, we should all respect her choice. Don't just stand there. The old man can't hold on any longer, we have to help him. With that, she flew towards the messenger of the ruins of God. Ji Tianqing also collected his thoughts and followed with the Burial of Heaven sword. End of chapter. Chapter 2474. X to the power of 8 1 Z 0 degrees M. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Dragon Fighting in the Wild. General Dragon Subduing roared as he waved his huge palms and sent out 2 balls of dark red light toward the messenger of the divine ruins. The 2 black dragons on his shoulders also opened their huge mouths and let out a high-pitched roar. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 2 black dragons emitted endless black light and formed 2 black dragon shadows that chased after the 2 balls of bloody light toward the messenger of the divine ruins. Black Sun Hurricane. At the same time, Ling Xian also roared as he waved his palms and released an earth-shattering black hurricane. Whoosh! Whoosh! The black hurricane turned into 900-mile-tall tornadoes that surged toward the messenger of the divine ruins from all directions and sealed off the surrounding area. This area immediately became chaotic. Facing the combined attack of two strong cultivators, the messenger of the divine ruins remained calm and used his divine power to activate the power of the black robe. Whoosh! The black robe he was wearing suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light that formed a huge shield. Bam! 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 The two balls of bloody light and the two black dragon shadows slammed into the golden shield with a deafening sound. The bloody light exploded and the black dragon shadows also shattered and dissipated in the sky. However, a crack appeared on the golden light barrier, and golden light shards burst out from it. Naturally, another tear appeared on the black robe, and shreds of cloth fluttered in the wind. The messenger of the divine ruins body shook as he hurriedly used his divine power to repair the crack on the shield. However, right at this moment, 9 sky-piercing hurricanes descended upon him, enveloping him and ruthlessly crushing him. The black tornado revolved at an extremely high speed, grinding and rubbing against the golden light shield, uttering cracking noises. As the tornado collapsed and shattered, the golden light shield also shattered inch by inch, turning into golden light fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Finally, when the golden shield collapsed, there were still 4 black tornadoes left. Whoosh! 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 The black tornadoes engulfed the messenger of the divine ruins and spun rapidly, trying to kill him. Seeing this, General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian heaved a sigh of relief. This was especially true of General Dragon Fu, whose eyes were filled with disdain as he sneered, "The guardian of the ancient ruins and the strongest person on the Shenwu continent? Haha, it's nothing more than that. You will all be annihilated by my hands. I am the strongest person in this world, the future ruler." Soon, the power of the 4 black tornadoes was exhausted and they gradually dissipated. Shua! The emissary of the divine ruins flew out of the black light fragment and staggered back into the sky. His appearance became even more miserable and disheveled. His black robe was full of holes, with more than a dozen pieces of cloth fluttering in the wind. Even the black cloak he was wearing was torn to shreds by the hurricane. Without the cover of the cloak, he revealed his true appearance. A wrinkled bronze-skinned face appeared before everyone's eyes. His face was old but resolute, filled with a firm and unyielding expression. On his square face, there was a pair of thick eyebrows that were like dragons, and a pair of turbid eyes that were filled with wisdom and calmness. This was a face that was dignified without being angry, causing others to feel deep veneration. But the most eye-catching thing was that on the emissary of the divine ruins' forehead, there was a special diamond-shaped mark that was faintly discernible under a few strands of white hair. Suddenly seeing that strange-looking imprint, General Dragon Subduing frowned. Ling Xian was also stunned and let out a cry of disbelief. Heavens! You're actually not human. Indeed, the emissary of the divine ruins' appearance and body shape were no different from a human's. He had always been wearing a large black robe and a large cloak, which concealed his true appearance. As a result, no one in the world had ever seen his true appearance. Everyone thought that the emissary of the divine ruins was the martial god of the human race, the most mysterious human powerhouse. But now, his cloak had been destroyed and his true appearance had been revealed. Only then did everyone discover this secret. At this time, Fairy Yuqing rushed over with Ji Tianqing and arrived behind General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The two of them were about to attack General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian when they were stunned by the scene in front of them. Both of them were stunned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. Especially Fairy Yuqing. This scene had the greatest impact on her. She had always thought that she was the only one in the world who understood the emissary of the divine ruins the best. But now she realized that she was wrong. She didn't understand the emissary of the divine ruins at all. She was even kept in the dark about whether the other party was a human or a foreign race. A strong sense of unfamiliarity rose from the bottom of her heart. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins, staring at the diamond-shaped mark on his forehead. For some reason, His long-dormant divine soul memories became blurred and chaotic again. His consciousness was temporarily in a trance and overlapped, and many strange and bizarre images appeared in his mind, especially that strange diamond-shaped mark, which flashed through his mind more than 30 times in a single thought. There were golden ones, dark red ones, purple ones, blue ones, white ones, and even black ones. They were all diamond-shaped marks of various colors, and there were some changes on the marks, which made them even more mysterious. The sudden change caused a strong thought to emerge in Ji Tianqing's mind. I've seen this strange diamond-shaped mark somewhere before. Also, I should be very familiar with it. I've seen many different colored marks. What race is the person who has this kind of mark? He vaguely remembered some fragmented images, but he couldn't remember what they were. His divine soul memories kept surging, but it was difficult for a complete memory fragment to appear. Ji Tianqing knew very well that the divine soul memories of his previous life had yet to be fully awakened. There were even more secrets hidden in the depths of his divine soul memories, waiting for him to unearth and unravel them. At this moment, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came back to their senses. Their attention shifted from the emissary of the divine ruins and focused on Ji Tianqing. Tsk. Ji Tianqing, you've indeed appeared. General Dragon Fu looked at him with a burning gaze, and a bloodthirsty sneer appeared on his face. Ling Xian also revealed a mocking sneer and said to Ji Tianqing, how have you been? Speaking of which, I still have to thank you properly. If you didn't severely injure the ancestor fiend god, how would I have the chance to replace it and become the new fiend god? General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came here to kill Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Now that Ji Tianqing had appeared, the two of them naturally had to get down to business and didn't want to be entangled with the emissary of the divine ruins. After Ji Tianqing heard Ling Xian's words, he sneered with contempt. I didn't guess wrongly. The ancestor fiend god saw you as his right-hand man, but in the end, he was betrayed by you and his divine soul was taken over by you. The despicableness and savagery of the fiend god race are indeed of the same origin. Ling Xian was mocked by him, but he didn't feel embarrassed or angry. He smiled and said, as the saying goes, the winner takes all. I was able to take over the ancestor fiend god's power and replace it to become the new fiend god. That means that my scheming and methods are above it, and I'm more suitable to be the leader of the fiend god race. Old Tai set a small goal first. Remember new 8th Chinese Network. Chapter 2475. Ling Xian's smug look made Ji Tianqing feel even more nauseous. He looked at Ling Xian from the corner of his eyes and said expressionlessly, the ancestor fiend celestial is an ancient great fiend celestial and was once the death god that struck fear in the hearts of the 100 races. Although I hate it and want to kill it, I have to admit that it is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime fiend celestial. At least, it will never submit to others and will not let the entire fiend celestial race become the vassals and slaves of other races. Ling Xian heard the sarcasm in Ji Tianqing's words, and sneered disapprovingly. Ji Tianqing, no matter how strong a person is, he is still a cold corpse. Only the living have the right to talk about strength of character and dignity. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Now that the heaven punishers have swept the world and no one can stop them, General Dragon Subduing is the most majestic tree. Only by following in the footsteps of General Dragon, Subduing can the fiend celestial race rule the world and be above the 100 races. And you and your fellow humans will suffer heavy casualties and become the slaves of the heaven punishers. Of course you won't be able to see this, because today you are going to die and be buried here. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. You have already explained very clearly what it means to be a dog relying on its master's power. Do you think that you have nothing to worry about and have a bright future just because you have General Dragon Subduing? Haha. Who knows if today is the day you die and this place is not your burial ground. Ling Xian frowned fiercely and his eyes shone with a fierce light. He said in a venomous tone, it's useless to argue. I will kill you now. As he said that, Ling Xian raised the pitch-black demonic blade in his hand and activated the power of calamity, condensing a pitch-black blade light on the demonic blade. Fairy Yuqing stepped out and said to Ji Tianqing behind her, Ji Tianqing, help the old man kill General Dragon Subduing. Leave this clown to me. Fairy Yuqing was about to activate the Sea God Shield and kill Ling Xian. General Dragon subduing frowned and shouted coldly, "Today's matter is between Ji Tianxing and me. You two old things, if you back down now, I won't make things difficult for you." Suddenly hearing these words, everyone's expression changed slightly, and a wisp of light flashed in their eyes. This was especially true for Ling Xian. While his face was filled with astonishment, he thought to himself, "That's not right." The dragon-subduing general had always been overbearing. Given his usual style, he would definitely kill all of them. But he actually took the initiative to concede? Could it be that General Fulong admits that he is no match for Ji Tianxing, Fairy Yuqing, and the emissary of the ruins of God? At this moment Fairy Yuqing sneered. "Haha. The dignified leader of the heaven-punishing race is afraid? What a joke. Weren't you acting all high and mighty before, and even wanted to kill this old woman's disciple Luo Shui? Why don't you want to be my enemy now?" General Dragon Fu looked at her coldly and said in a low voice, "Since Luo Shui is dead, my only enemy left is Ji Tianxing. This matter has nothing to do with you." Fairy Yuqing straightened her wide sleeves and said slowly, "Nothing to do with it? Ji Tianxing and this old woman's disciple Luo Shui are best friends. If you want to kill Ji Tianxing, how can this old woman sit by and do nothing?" At this moment, the emissary of the ruins of God had already suppressed his injuries and took out a bronze mask to wear on his face. His voice was as low as muffled thunder, and he said in a dignified tone, "General Dragon Fu, put away your clumsy plan. You want to kill Ji Tianxing first, then deal with this old man and Fairy Yuqing? Ha ha ha, the people of the Shenwu continent are not that stupid. This old man and Fairy Yuqing are definitely not people who are afraid of death. Today let's settle this here and now." The emissary of the ruins of God's words not only exposed General Dragon Fu's scheme, but also completely shattered his fantasies. General Dragon Fu knew that this matter would not be resolved peacefully, so he did not waste any more words. He smiled nastily and said, "Very well. Since you are so eager to die, then I will fulfill your wish." The moment he finished speaking, General Dragon subduing slowly took out a thick and wide blood blade and swung it towards Ji Tianxing. Slaughter of the heavens! The huge blood blade that was 100 meters long lit up with a dazzling blood-red light, and thousands of mysterious images and symbols appeared on the blade. Swish, swish, swish. The blood blade instantly slashed out 4 huge blood-red blades that could split the heavens and earth apart, ruthlessly slashing toward Ji Tianxing. The blades were extremely sharp and carried a murderous aura that could shake one's soul. However, the most powerful thing that Ji Tianxing feared the most was the formless power that descended from the heavens. That was the essence of the Heaven Punisher's power. It could not be seen or touched, but it was as terrifying as the heavens and earth, making it difficult for one to even think of resisting. Ji Tianxing's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. General Dragon Fu was the strongest enemy he had ever faced in his life. He stared at the 4 blood-red blades and gripped the sword of burial of heaven tightly with both hands, exploding with 100% of his divine power. Sword piercing the heavens. With a furious roar, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and ruthlessly stabbed out a 1,000-meter-long divine sword light that pierced the heavens from below. Boom! Crack! The huge divine sword went against the formless suppressive power and went against the current, hitting one of the blood-red blades with a loud boom. With a deafening shattering sound, the blood-red blade shattered into pieces and scattered in the sky. Then the huge divine sword, which had used up almost half of its power, ruthlessly stabbed the second blood-red blade. Boom! 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 The second blood-red blade also collapsed. However, the huge divine sword's power had been used up and it also shattered. However, General Dragon Fu still had 2 more blood-red blades that slashed toward Ji Tianxing with undiminished power. He had no time to counterattack and could only use his divine body to resist. At this critical moment, the messenger of the divine ruins brazenly attacked. Sky sea parting light, sun and moon shine together. The messenger of the divine ruins shouted in a solemn tone. His palms separated and interlocked, shooting out endless rainbow divine light that respectively struck the 2 blood-red blades. Boom! The rainbow divine light suddenly exploded, turning into billions of dazzling fragments that covered the sky. The two blood-red blades also shattered, turning into specks of blood-red light that dissipated in the sky. Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins worked together to neutralize General Dragon Fu's divine power. General Dragon Fu was not surprised by this. In fact, he had already expected it. His expression did not change as he waved his blood-red blade again, piercing out blood-red light that filled the sky toward Ji Tianqing. His mountain-like body also released a vast and formless power that pressed down like the collapse of the heavens. Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins did not dare to relax. They both used their divine powers with all their might to block and counterattack. At the same time, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian also started fighting. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand in the sky. Originally, Ling Xian only wanted to join forces with General Dragon Fu to kill Ji Tianqing as soon as possible and then retreat. But as soon as he attacked, he was stopped by Fairy Yuqing. No matter how he tried to break out and dodge, he could not escape from Fairy Yuqing's entanglement. In his rage, he could only give up on attacking Ji Tianqing and decided to deal with Fairy Yuqing first. Chapter 2476. X to the power of 8 carat 1 Z carat 0 degrees M. Translator. Nayarbo Studio Editor. Nayarbo Studio. Boom. 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 Deafening noises exploded in the sky, reverberating endlessly. The 5 martial gods had all used their divine abilities and secret techniques, and it was difficult to tell who would win. Dazzling rainbow divine light illuminated a radius of 5,000 kilometers, making this area look like a divine realm. Layer after layer of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples, sweeping through heaven and earth. All the mountain ranges and peaks within a radius of 5,000 kilometers were razed to the ground. The ground had turned into ruins, filled with deep pits and ravines. It was a complete mess. This was a great battle that could destroy heaven and earth. Fortunately, it had happened in the depths of the ruins of God. No matter how much damage it caused, it would not harm the innocent people. At the same time, no one could get close to watch the battle. Otherwise, if this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the Shenwu continent. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The 5 powerhouses were divided into 2 groups, and they had already exchanged tens of thousands of blows. The battlefield had also shifted 30,000 kilometers. Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian were still unable to determine a victor, and the battle was very anxious. Both of them were exhausted and in a sorry state. Their bodies were covered in wounds and bloodstains, and they looked like 2 bloody men. Originally, Fairy Yuqing was a martial god who had been famous for thousands of years, and her strength was extremely strong. Ling Xian had just broken through to the deity realm, and his foundation was still shallow. Logically speaking, it should be easy for Fairy Yuqing to defeat Ling Xian. However, Fairy Yuqing had been injured twice in a row, and her injuries had already worsened. She only had about 40% of her strength left. Ling Xian was weaker, but he had inherited the ancestral Godfiend Skyfiend physique, and he had abnormal defense and recovery abilities. Even if his body was covered in bloody holes and wounds, and dozens of demon bones and internal organs could be clearly seen, he could still hold on. On the other side, Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the ruins of God were still desperately attacking General Dragon subduing. Unfortunately, both sides were equally matched. Or rather, it would be more appropriate to say that both sides would suffer. General Dragon subduing's huge body was covered in hundreds of wounds that crisscrossed, and blood flowed out. Even the black dragon on his left shoulder had its neck severed by Ji Tianqing's god-slaying flying dagger. As for the emissary of the divine ruins and Ji Tianqing's injuries, they were also tragic and had severely weakened their battle prowess. Finally, the power of the emissary of the divine ruins became weaker and weaker, and he could not hold on any longer. He hesitated for a moment before sending a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing. "Kid, it's not a good idea for us to be in a stalemate like this. It's very likely that we'll exhaust our god power and fall into a passive state. The dragon subduing general still has reinforcements, but we don't. We can't die together with him." Ji Tianqing cast his arts to fend off General Dragon subduing's attacks while sending a voice transmission. "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. I had the same intention as well. Why don't I hold off General Dragon subduing, while you assist Fairy Yuqing to get rid of Ling Xian first. Ling Xian's strength is weaker. He can be used as a breakthrough. The emissary of the Divine Ruins' turbid eyes flashed as he hurriedly nodded in agreement. That's a good idea. However, you are better at restraining demons than this old man. Therefore, I will hold off General Dragon subduing while you go and kill Ling Xian. Ji Tianqing was a little hesitant as he asked in a worried tone, "Can you hold on?" The emissary of the Divine Ruins answered without hesitation, "Definitely within half an hour." Ji Tianqing no longer hesitated as he nodded. "All right, then be careful." With that, he made a feint at General Dragon subduing and retreated hundreds of miles away. After shaking off General Dragon subduing, he flew across the sky at lightning speed and hurried towards the battlefield 2,000 miles away. There, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian were still fighting to the death. Neither of them was willing to back down. Ji Tianqing maintained his invisible state and silently arrived at the battlefield. He lay dormant for a few breaths of time before he found an opportunity to strike. He decisively took out the god-slaying flying dagger. Swoosh! The 3-inch flying dagger cut through the sky and lit up with a dazzling golden light as it ruthlessly pierced towards Ling Xian's back. Ling Xian immediately sensed the danger. His pupils constricted as he used his teleportation skill without even turning his head to dodge the flying dagger. But at this moment, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed coldly as he brazenly attacked. "This is the moment I've been waiting for. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist." He abruptly raised his fists and recklessly punched at the empty sky 100 miles in front of him. Kaboom! 2 mountain-like phantoms of dragons and elephants instantly shattered that part of the sky, turning it into a shattered pitch-black void. Violent and devastating shockwaves erupted, mixed with a pitch-black void storm. There was also a figure with a crooked and wretched appearance. That figure was Ling Xian. He had just entered the alternate space and was in the process of teleporting when Ji Tianqing shattered the space and forcefully squeezed him out. The power of the shattering space far surpassed that of a knife or an axe. It directly shattered his internal organs and meridians. He staggered into the sky and opened his mouth to spit out a large mouthful of blood mixed with many pieces of internal organs. While lifting his sleeve to wipe off the blood stains on his face, he suddenly raised his head to look at Ji Tianqing and roared with a ferocious expression. "Ji Tianqing, you despicable and shameless villain, how dare you sneak attack me?" Ji Tianqing glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered. "Haha, these words coming from your mouth are really ironic." As his voice fell, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb with all his strength, fiercely slashing out a blazing white giant sword. God-slaying sword. The heaven-mending orb in his mind spewed out endless divine power, which condensed into a 1,000-meter-long giant divine sword through the sword of burial of heaven. Swoosh! The giant divine sword fell from the sky and slashed towards Ling Xian's head with a loud bang. Before the giant sword arrived, the dazzling white light had already illuminated a radius of 3,000 miles, dispelling all the darkness. The terrifying suppressive power sealed an area of 100 miles, causing the space to almost freeze. Ling Xian's body was bent, but he clenched his teeth and held on, recklessly erupting with all his strength. "Ji Tianqing, I will never lose to you, don't even think about it. Fallen devil. Darkness indestructible." As his angry roar sounded, his burly body suddenly ignited with purple flames that soared into the sky, emitting endless black demonic fog. The purple flames and the black fog mixed together and turned into a vortex that was dozens of miles wide, spinning at an extreme speed. This was the ultimate skill that Ling Xian obtained from the ancestral devil god. He had just succeeded in cultivating it not long ago and had not used it yet. He turned himself into the fallen devil Qi. Even if the vortex was destroyed, as long as there was a trace of devil Qi, he could recover again. This was the first time he used this ultimate skill. But it was also the last time. Boom! Amidst the deafening loud noise, the giant divine sword ruthlessly stabbed into the devil Qi vortex. The vortex spun with all its might, and the purple flames flashed wildly, wrapping around the giant divine sword in a futile attempt to dissolve the power of the giant divine sword. However, the vortex and the giant divine sword were only in a deadlock for a moment before quickly disintegrating like snow under the scorching sun. In just 2 short breaths, all the purple flames and fallen devil qi were purified by the divine light. As a result, Ling Xian also no longer existed, completely dying out. Old Tai set a small goal. First carat. Remember New 8th Chinese Network. Chapter 2477. Ling Xian was completely dead. He had just inherited the power and status of the ancestor fiend god, and was about to lead the demon race to glory. He had thought that he would be the one laughing in the end. But the truth was the opposite. He had just gone out with General Dragon subduing for the first time and had died under Ji Tianqing's sword. It was too depressing, too surprising. Swoosh! A black stone the size of a fist fell from the sky. This was the boundless divine stone that General Dragon subduing had given to Ling Xian. When Ling Xian and Fairy Yuqing were fighting, he had used this divine stone several times to resolve fatal dangers. Unfortunately, Ling Xian did not have the chance to use it during the battle with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a dazzling golden light, grabbing the boundless divine stone in his palm. He only looked at it twice before putting it into his space ring to study it in the future. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Fairy Yuqing took out 2 divine pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. She did not waste any time and hurriedly asked Ji Tianqing, "How is the old man? Let's go and help him, otherwise he won't be able to hold on." Ji Tianqing nodded and brought her to the messenger of the divine ruins and General Dragon subduing. When the 2 of them arrived near the battlefield, they saw General Dragon subduing attacking fiercely, forcing the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. In just a few breaths, the messenger of the divine ruins had been stabbed 3 times, and blood spurted out. But he stubbornly held on and fought General Dragon subduing with all his might. Originally, when Ji Tianqing left the battle, General Dragon subduing chased after him without any regard. The messenger of the divine ruins had used all his skills to stall General Dragon subduing. General Dragon subduing could not escape and was about to kill the messenger of the divine ruins in anger before dealing with Ji Tianqing. But before he could kill the messenger of the divine ruins, Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing had arrived. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing appear, General Dragon subduing's expression darkened and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Of course he could guess that Ling Xian was most likely dead. Previously, he had brought Ling Xian, the 12 captains, and dozens of heaven-punishing clan warriors with him. Now everyone had died in battle and he was the only one left. The strong sense of defeat caused him to be filled with rage, and he even had the intention to retreat. He had a premonition that this operation was going to fail. With his strength, it was basically impossible for him to defeat Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing. This was indeed the case. When Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing joined the battle, the pressure on General Dragon subduing instantly increased. The situation was completely reversed. The dragon subduing general was besieged by 3 people, and immediately fell into a disadvantage. Ji Tianqing's killing intent rose, and he wanted to take the chance to get rid of the dragon subduing general to prevent any future troubles. Therefore, he did not hold back at all and used his strongest killer move. The god-slaying flying knife was also hiding at the side, ready to deal a fatal blow to the dragon subduing general. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. Rising Sword. Boom 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 boom. Earth-shattering sounds kept erupting, and dazzling divine light bloomed, covering thousands of miles. The 2 sides exchanged over 300 moves, shattering the sky within several thousand li. The ground had also turned into a vast expanse of ruins. Finally, the dragon subduing general's injuries were too severe, and he could not hold on any longer. There was not a single piece of flesh on his body that was intact, and he was covered with crisscrossing wounds and bloody holes. The 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders had their necks cut off, and blood flowed freely. Especially on his forehead, there was a long and narrow sword wound that extended all the way to the center of his brows. Just a little more and his head would have been cut off by the sword of burial of heaven. Also, the dragon subduing general's strength was rapidly weakening, and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. He knew very well that if he continued to fight, he might be killed on the spot. Damn it! Looks like there's no way to get rid of Ji Tianqing today. I can only think of a long-term plan. The dragon-subduing general gritted his teeth and immediately decided to retreat. He waved his blood blade with all his might, forcing Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. Then he formed a seal with his left hand, and his body lit up with dark red blood light. With a swoosh he broke through the sky. With a flash of blood light, he escaped into an alternate space and disappeared. Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing immediately released their divine senses and used their spatial powers to search for his traces and aura. However, the dragon-subduing general had already passed through several layers of alternate spaces and moved thousands of miles away. Even if the three of them wanted to kill him, they had no way to do so. Helpless, Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing could only give up. Damn it! He actually escaped. It will be difficult to kill him next time. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth, his heart filled with anger. The messenger of the divine ruins was also filled with regret. He coughed and said, "No wonder the heaven punishers are invincible and no one can stop them. The dragon-subduing general's strength is really terrifying." Fairy Yuqing nodded in agreement. Logically speaking, he is only at the 8th level of the martial god realm and is on par with us. But his battle experience is so rich that it's terrifying, and the number of divine abilities and ultimate skills he has mastered is as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Ji Tianqing suppressed his anger and said calmly, "Seniors, don't worry. Even if the dragon-subduing general escapes today, he will only be struggling at death's door and live for a few more months. Now that his wings have been cut off, he is alone and can no longer invade and expand." Seeing that he was full of confidence, the messenger of the divine ruins and Fairy Yuqing also calmed down. The three of them were silent, and the atmosphere was awkward and gloomy. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed to the two of them, breaking the silence. "I never thought that the two of you would help me at such a critical moment. I, Ji Tianqing, will remember this kindness in my heart and will never forget it." The messenger of the divine ruins waved his hand and said in a solemn tone, "There is no need to be so polite. The dragon-subduing general is from another race and wants to invade the entire Shenwu continent. At this moment of life and death, we should join forces to fight against the enemy." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Senior's injuries are so tragic. It is better for you to go back and recuperate early to avoid any future troubles." The messenger of the divine ruins nodded to show that he understood and said in a complicated tone, "I know that after you recover from your injuries, you will definitely find the dragon-subduing general for revenge and eliminate the root of the problem. Although I want to help you, I can't leave the divine ruins, so I can't help you. After all, I am only a mausoleum keeper." Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Senior, you worry too much. I have my own ways to deal with the dragon-subduing general." The messenger of the divine ruins did not say anything else and bid farewell to him and Fairy Yuqing before turning to leave. In the sky, only Fairy Yuqing and Ji Tianqing were left. Ji Tianqing looked at Fairy Yuqing and said, "Thank you for your help, Fairy Yuqing." Fairy Yuqing waved her hand and said earnestly, "You don't have to thank me. The reason why I helped was because I had my own selfish motives. Just like how I helped Luo Shui back then, I had the same thought. I only hope that the two of you won't hold a grudge against Luo Shui. After Yun Yao inherits Goddess Yaoguang's inheritance, don't forget to unlock the world seal and give all the martial gods a chance of survival and hope." Chapter 2478. Fairy Yuqing's words stunned Ji Tianqing. He frowned in confusion and asked, "Fairy Yuqing, I can understand your feelings. But are you sure that Yun Yao can break the world seal?" Fairy Yuqing hesitated for a moment and said with uncertainty, "About the world seal, it happened in the ancient times 30,000 years ago. It had happened so long ago that no one knew the truth or the inside story. The only clue we know is Goddess Yaoguang, so we can only pin our hopes on this." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "I understand. Please don't worry, if Yun Yao really has such ability, we will definitely do our best. But if she can't do anything, then you can only find another way." The hope in Fairy Yuqing's eyes dimmed a lot, and she nodded with a lonely expression. "My injuries are too serious, so I have to return to Jade Clear Sky to recuperate. I'll leave you a communication jade slip. If there's any news, let me know, so that I won't have to wait needlessly. After saying that, Fairy Yuqing left a communication jade slip and turned to leave. Her back view was bleak and lonely, like a beauty in her twilight years and a hero about to die. Ji Tianqing was experienced, so he could understand that feeling of helplessness and powerlessness. After standing on the spot for a moment, he took out the small golden tower. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, his figure disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, he returned to Jiutiantin Extreme's tower and appeared on the 5th floor. The previous continuous battles had also caused him to be seriously injured, and his strength was also extremely weak. He hurriedly returned to the 6th floor of the distorted space-time and went into seclusion to recuperate in a dark and secluded place. Time always passed quickly in the distorted space-time. Unknowingly, Ji Tianqing had been recuperating in seclusion for more than half a year. His injuries had finally healed, and his strength had also returned to its peak. However, he did not end his cultivation. He continued to cultivate for another 2 months, and naturally broke through to the 2nd level of the martial god realm. Ever since he broke through to the martial god realm, the progress of his strength had slowed down. If he had not fought with so many martial god realm experts and fought with General Fulong, he would not have advanced so quickly. After breaking through to the 2nd level of the martial god realm, his combat strength had increased by several times, and his aura was even more sacred and majestic. After finishing his cultivation, he took out the sword of burial heaven and opened the world in the sword. Without a doubt, Yun Yao's soul had already finished the fusion and she had already woken up. She was cultivating within peaceful Earth City. She was in an extremely profound, elegant and otherworldly state. She was like an inconspicuous speck of dust, yet she was as tranquil as a wisp of cloud. It wasn't until Ji Tianqing woke her up that she ended her cultivation and left the sword world. Swoosh! 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 Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "At that time, Luo Shui forcefully fused his soul with yours and you fell into a coma." A few days later, General Fulong and Ling Xian led the experts of the Heaven Punisher race to attack us. They wanted to capture us all. Fortunately, Old Man God and Fairy Yuqing helped. We killed Ling Xian and all the experts of the Heaven Punisher race. Only General Fulong managed to escape. Ji Tianqing told Yun Yao what had happened. Yun Yao nodded slightly with a complicated expression. She said in a low voice, "Tianqing, I'm sorry, but there's something I have to tell you. The current me is no longer myself." She sighed with a lonely expression. Her lips curled into a self-mocking smile. She murmured, "The words the Divine Master said before he died were exactly the same." She did not disappear. Instead, she continued on in another way. "I am not only Yun Yao, but also Luo Shui and Goddess Yao Guang." At this point, Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing with clear eyes. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Tianqing, when I'm no longer myself, will you still treat me the same as before?" Ji Tianqing could see that she was hesitating and struggling in her heart. She was even worried and afraid. After all, she was just Yun Yao in the past. She had her own memories, independent thoughts and emotions. But now, she had suddenly merged with Luo Shui's emotions and Goddess Yao Guang's memories. Her soul had also become complicated. In her opinion, she was no longer pure. It was as if she had 3 personalities. It was a rare and strange thing. She was very worried that Ji Tianqing would not be able to accept her. Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment. He looked at her with a firm and sincere gaze and smiled. "Yao Yao, you don't have to say sorry. This is not your fault. In fact, the fact that you can have such thoughts proves that you are still you. Whether it's Luo Shui or Goddess Yao Guang, they can't control your emotions and mind. They can't change your nature and thoughts. They are just accessories to you. They give you 2 more memories and experience. This way you will become more mature and stable. You will grow faster." Hearing his answer, Yun Yao felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She heaved a sigh of relief. The worry and fear in her heart had all dissipated. Her expression also returned to normal. "And Tianqing, thank you." Yun Yao nodded solemnly. A faint smile appeared on her face. Ji Tianqing reached out and hugged her. He patted her back gently and comforted her. Don't worry. Whether it's Luo Shui or Goddess Yaoguang's memories, they won't hurt you. What we need to do is to inherit their legacy and fulfill their unfulfilled wishes. For example, the seal of the 5 elements world has suppressed this world for 30,000 years. It has cut off the path of all martial gods. You need to work hard in your cultivation and become strong enough to break the seal for everyone. Yunyao nodded and explained, although I've finished fusing with my spirit, most of the memories related to Goddess Yaoguang are still sealed. My strength is not high enough, so I can't come into contact with those ancient taboos. I also don't know if I can break the seal. In fact, I don't even know if the seal has anything to do with me. However, I'll try my best. Ji Tianqing had already expected this outcome. He comforted her. It's fine. There's no need to rush this matter. We have plenty of time. You can continue to cultivate here and try to fuse with your spirit's memories, as well as Luo Shui's strength as soon as possible. I still have important matters to attend to, so I need to go out. Luo Shui was dead, martial god Tianjue was dead, and Ling Xian had also fallen. The situation on the continent had become even more chaotic. Ji Tianqing needed to find out more about the situation on the Xinwu continent and stabilize the situation as soon as possible. When the time was right, he would go and kill General Fu Long. Then the world would be at peace. Just as he was about to turn and leave, Yunyao grabbed his hand and gently said, Tianqing, wait. There's still something very important. What is it? Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and revealed a puzzled expression. Yunyao lowered her head slightly and whispered, I have a premonition that Chanchen and Yaya's pregnancy is about to end. They will be born soon. End of chapter. Chapter 2479. Yunyao's voice was very soft, but Ji Tianqing could still hear it clearly. When he heard this good news, his body trembled, and a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. His eyes, which were as deep as the sea of stars, shone with a bright light. Really? Our children are about to be born. It had been several years since Yunyao had given birth to the children. Chunchen and Yaya were extremely intelligent, and they possessed shocking innate talents. Even though they were still in their mother's womb, the 2 children already possessed extraordinary strength. In the first few years, Ji Tianqing had often hoped that the children would be born soon. But after a long time, the children still hadn't been born, and his hopes had faded. Now, Yunyao had suddenly told him this good news, so how could he not be overjoyed? After all, he had lived 2 lives, but this was his first time becoming a father. Yunyao lowered her head shyly, and her hands gently caressed her swollen belly. She said gently, my senses are not wrong. The 2 children have already fallen into a deep sleep, and they won't wake up for a while. They won't wake up until the day they are born, and then we will be able to see them. Ji Tianqing nodded and laughed heartily. Good. Then I will strive to completely eliminate the Heaven Punisher before the children are born, and I will return peace to Xinwu continent. Yunyao then gave him a few more words of advice before he left the distorted spacetime. 6 days later, Ji Tianqing left the ruins of God, entered the vast divine kingdom, and arrived at Skycloud City. As he hurried along, he roughly observed the situation in the vast divine kingdom. More than 95% of the territory had been reclaimed by the vast divine kingdom and returned to the human race. The remaining demons were extremely few in number, and they were all stragglers, so they weren't a threat at all. Peace had also been restored in the Outcloud Empire. Skycloud City, which had been razed to the ground, was still the capital of the Outcloud Empire. It was being rebuilt in full swing, and more than half of it had been completed. Ji Tianqing met with Taihao Yun 7 in the recently completed Imperial Palace. Taihao Yunqi was very welcoming of his arrival, and he was very excited. After the 2 of them met, Taihao Yunqi did not receive him in the main hall. Instead, he brought him to the study. The 2 of them sat down in the study and began to discuss business. With a smile on his face, Taihao Yunqi looked at Ji Tianqing and asked respectfully, Senior, you haven't shown up for several months. During this period of time, you must have been doing something earth-shattering, right? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with a playful smile, It seems that you have gotten some news. Taihao Yun-7 nodded repeatedly and excitedly said, half a month ago, a piece of news spread throughout the Xinwu continent, and it shook the entire world. The entire martial arts world was in an uproar. It was said that a few peerless martial god realm experts were fighting a great battle in the depths of the ruins of God, causing the heavens and earth to crumble and the sun and moon to dim in comparison. After that battle, many martial gods disappeared without a trace. However, what we can be sure of is that the Heaven Punisher race has suffered many casualties, and the leader of the Devil race has also fallen. As Taihao Yun-7 spoke, he observed Ji Tianqing's reaction. When he saw that Ji Tianqing did not refute him, he became even more certain of his conjecture, and he said with admiration, when I first heard this news, I was so shocked that I could not believe it. However, after thinking about it carefully, I realized that this matter was most likely related to you. Even the new leader of the Devil race was most likely killed by you, right? Ji Tianqing did not hide it and nodded. That's right. I killed the ancestral demon god. And Ling Xian inherited his power and became the new leader. Moreover, Ling Xian joined the dragon subduing general, and followed him to the ruins of God to get rid of me. However, I had the help of 2 senior experts, and they killed a large number of heaven punishers as well as Ling Xian. Only the dragon subduing general managed to escape with serious injuries. When he heard this, Taihao Yun-7's eyes widened, and he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He was so excited that he almost stood up. Heavens! This is too unbelievable. If the situation is as you say, then our only enemy now is the dragon subduing general. That's right. Ji Tianqing nodded and calmly said, as long as we get rid of the dragon subduing general, the heaven punishers will also collapse, and the Xinwu continent will welcome peace. That's great. Taihao Yun-7 was so excited that he could not help but clench his fists and cheer. Ji Tianqing picked up his teacup and took a sip. He then said slowly, Godchild, tell me about the boundless divine kingdom and the Xinwu continent. Taihao Yun-7 hurriedly suppressed his excitement and solemnly explained, Senior, thanks to your help, the boundless divine kingdom's territory has basically been recovered. The Devil race army that invaded the divine kingdom has basically been annihilated, and only a small number of them managed to escape back to Dark North Mountain. After martial god Tianju fell, the various empires fell into chaos, as they all wanted to unify and annex other countries. However, the Heaven Punishers took advantage of the situation and took control of several empires. However, this is not a cause for concern. As long as you kill the dragon subduing general, the Heaven Punishers will lose their leader, and they will be like a pile of loose sand that can be quickly defeated. As for Dark North Mountain, its vitality has been greatly damaged after this war, so it is not a cause for concern. After news of the new demon god's death spread, the Devil race fell into panic and despair, and they all went into hiding, not daring to show their faces. However, the Heaven Punishers were not willing to give up. In the name of appeasing the Devil race, they wantonly recruited warriors from Dark North Mountain and formed an army. However, many of the Devil race's tribes have no one to use. When they learned that the Heaven Punishers were capturing warriors everywhere, many of the Devil race hid in their underground lairs and dangerous places to avoid disaster. At this point, Taihao Yun-7 helplessly sighed and said in a low voice, the most tense situation right now is the Luoshui Divine Kingdom's territory, which is still occupied by the Heaven Punishers. All of the humans have become slaves of the Heaven Punishers, and they are currently in an abyss of suffering and suffering. In fact, I heard that the Heaven Punishers have become even more ruthless recently, and they have been exploiting the commoners even more. They are crazily excavating and collecting resources. Ji Tianqing nodded to indicate that he understood. His tone was cold as he said, this is just their final madness, and it will not last for long. About 80% of the Heaven Punishers' martial gods have already died. They are already panicking. With their current strength, it is impossible for them to take over the entire Xinwu continent. In fact, they cannot even maintain the Luoshui Divine Kingdom's territory. I reckon that the Heaven Punishers want to obtain some more resources and then retreat after they are defeated. Taihao Yun-7 nodded in agreement. That's right, I think so too. Senior, what should we do next? Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and then asked Shenxi, How are your father's injuries? Tai Hao Yun 7 hurriedly replied, Thank you for your concern, senior. I asked him a few days ago, and he said that he was fine and would come out of seclusion soon. Ji Tianqing smiled and ordered, Then send a message to Tai Hao and ask him to help me kill General Fu Long. End of chapter. Chapter 2480. Ever since the fall of the Luoshui divine nation, all of its territories had been controlled by the Heaven Punisher race. Even the Luoshui mountain, which symbolized the majesty of the divine nation, had been taken over by the dragon-subduing general. Before the fall of the Luoshui divine nation, the disciples and elders of the Luoshui mountain had fled in all directions. Most of them had died tragically under the Heaven Punisher race's blade in the process of resisting them. Only a small number of people were still alive, but they were scattered all over the continent. They were either enslaved by the Heaven Punisher race or became homeless wanderers. The dragon-subduing general had taken over the Luoshui mountain and made it his base camp. It was now evening. The setting sun was about to set in the sky, sprinkling down an orange-red afterglow that looked like blood. At the peak of the Luoshui mountain, in the most majestic and dignified dragon-subduing palace, in a dimly lit secret room filled with dark red fog, General Dragon Subduing was quietly sleeping. This specially made secret chamber was located underground and had a radius of 3,000 meters. Only then was it barely able to contain his mountain-like body. His body was wrapped in dark red light as he circulated his energy to heal his injuries. His muscular body was covered with crisscrossing scars, which still looked hideous and terrifying. However, as time passed, the dark red fog continued to flow, and those scars were rapidly disappearing. Suddenly, a respectful voice came from outside the secret chamber. Lord General, Deputy General, and requests an audience. Hearing the black-armored guard's voice, the sleeping dragon-subduing general slowly opened his dark purple eyes. Let him in. The dragon-subduing general moved his wide mouth and let out a low roar that was as deep as thunder. Then the tall and majestic stone door of the secret chamber slowly opened. And Yu, who was wearing golden armor and looking travel-worn, stepped into the secret chamber. After he entered the secret chamber, the heavy stone door closed with a bang. And Yu walked in front of the dragon-subduing general and bowed respectfully. Subordinate, and Yu greets the Lord General. After that, he carefully sized up the dragon-subduing general and instantly frowned. He asked worriedly, Lord General, why are you so heavily injured? The dragon-subduing general did not stop healing. As he circulated the dark red fog, he said, This is all thanks to that bastard Ji Tianqing. And Yu's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed in disbelief, Ji Tianqing? That's impossible. How can he be your opponent? The dragon-subduing general sneered and said slowly, If he was alone, of course, he would not be my opponent and I would have killed him. However, he still has two helpers. One is an old man who guards the divine ruins, and the other is an old woman who is Luo Shui's master. That is. And Yu was suddenly enlightened and he heaved a sigh of relief. The dragon-subduing general. Subduing general looked. Was the subduing general? He subduing general said dragon subduing general had general. Was subduing general. Subduing general. And Yu's body stiffened, and his face turned ugly. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted, General, please calm down. It's all my fault. I didn't investigate properly. Without waiting for him to finish, the dragon-subduing general waved his hand and said, This is a tragic lesson. You must remember it well. It's too late to confess now. I don't have many people left. So what you need to do is to atone for your sins. And Yu quickly nodded and said, This subordinate understands. I will definitely remember General's teachings. The dragon-subduing general continued, In this invasion of the five elements world, I am heavily injured. I also lost more than 1,000 soldiers and more than 40 captains. Such losses are unprecedented and will never be repeated. In the past few hundred years, I have led the fleet to conquer more than half of the galaxy and invaded more than 100 worlds. I have never encountered such a mysterious world. And Yu nodded in agreement. That's right. The five elements world is not only mysterious, but also very special. We have traversed more than half of the purple cloud galaxy, and have never seen a world sealed by a deity. Moreover, there are not many martial gods in this world, but they have extremely terrifying supernatural powers and techniques. General, please forgive me for being blunt. I'm afraid we have to prepare to retreat. The dragon-subduing general suddenly laughed coldly. He stared at Yu coldly and asked, "What? You're scared? The final battle is not here yet. Do you think I will lose to that bastard Ji Tianxing?" Yu was intimidated by the powerful aura. He knelt on the ground in fear and quickly kowtowed to apologize. "General, please calm down. I don't mean to belittle you. It's just that you are heavily injured and Ji Tianxing still has two powerful helpers. If we withdraw our defenses, we can still fight them. But we have occupied the territories of two divine kingdoms. We are too spread out." The dragon-subduing general ignored him and said in a domineering and imposing tone, "Those two old fellows only have half of their lives left. How would they dare to come and find me? As for Ji Tianxing, he would not dare to come to me alone for revenge. Otherwise, I'll definitely tear him into pieces." Yu quickly nodded in agreement and said firmly, "That's right. With Ji Tianxing's strength, he's definitely not a match for Lord General. You can easily crush him." With that, the dragon-subduing general's anger dissipated. The atmosphere in the secret room calmed down and the pressure on Yu also lessened. He hesitated before asking, "General, I think to be on the safe side, why don't you give the order to gather the other 50 captains? Or you can report this to the Grand Marshal. After all, the Five Elements world is too special. There are even ancient demonic gods reincarnated and divine kings reincarnated thousands of years ago." Originally, the dragon-subduing general frowned and wanted to interrupt Yu. But in the end, he fell silent and nodded. "That's right. The legends of ancient demonic gods and human goddesses, as well as Kenshin who died thousands of years ago, have all reappeared. This Five Elements world must have some kind of secret and power that no one knows. This is very important. If we report this to the Grand Marshal, he will definitely take it seriously." Seeing that the dragon-subduing general had agreed, Yu smiled and said, "That's right. By then, you will be able to make a great contribution and gain the Grand Marshal's recognition. I have heard you say that our great emperor is connected to the Divine Kingdom, and only follows the will of the Divine Kingdom." The dragon-subduing general's expression changed and he scolded sternly, "Shut up. This is a secret that involves the Divine Kingdom of the Upper Realm. How dare you speak of it?" Yu shrunk his neck and said respectfully, "General, please calm down. There are only the two of us here. You don't have to worry about the secret being leaked. I am also thinking of your future. That's why I brought this up. Think about it. If the Divine Kingdom knows that there is a mortal world sealed by the gods and there is a miracle of an ancient demonic god reincarnated." End of chapter. Chapter 2481. Yu did not finish his sentence. However, General Dragon-subduing had already understood what he meant. The two of them looked at each other. After a moment of silence, they both burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha." General Dragon-subduing raised his head and laughed. "Yu, you are really daring. How dare you guess the will of the God's court?" Yu revealed a knowing expression and said with a smile, "The will of the God's court is naturally unpredictable and complicated. It is not something ordinary people like us can guess. However, I believe that if the God's court knows that such a miracle has appeared in the mortal world, they will be very interested. As the person who discovered this secret, you will definitely become the greatest contributor to our race. When the time comes, you will receive God's grace and directly ascend to the upper world. It is not impossible." Yu's flattery made General Dragon-subduing's heart sway, as he secretly yearned for it. However, he did not lose his mind and quickly calmed down. He shook his head gently and said, "It is very possible that I will be rewarded for my contributions. As for directly ascending to the upper world with God's grace, that is no different from a fool's dream. Even our marshal and great emperor can only be trapped in the mortal world and serve the God's court. They are all true gods who have broken through to the martial god realm." At this point, General Dragon-subduing's tone was also filled with emotions. And Yu was very smart. He knew that he could not continue to interrupt, so he remained silent. After a long while, General Dragon Subduing regained his composure and said in a dignified tone, "This time, I will listen to your advice and report this to the marshal. In addition, I summoned you back because I want you to stay behind and protect me. During this period of time, you will be in charge of everything. You must be careful of Ji Tianxing's revenge." And Yu hesitated and asked with a frown, "General, what about the affairs of Tianzhu God Nation? During this period of time, I have been in charge of Tianzhu God Nation and have been taking in all the empires and forces. The progress has been quite smooth. If I am away for too long, I am afraid that the situation that has been stabilized with much difficulty will fall apart again." General Dragon Subduing glanced at him and said coldly, "Just now I was praising you for being sensible and smart enough. I did not expect you to be so muddle-headed on this matter. Our top priority right now is to pull back our defensive forces and prepare for the decisive battle with Ji Tianxing. So what if he temporarily gave up on the Heaven Extinction God Nation? As long as we get rid of Ji Tianxing and kill those two old fellows, the entire Five Elements world will be ours." And Yu's eyes flashed with reluctance. He lowered his head and bowed. This subordinate obeys. The dragon subduing general pretended not to notice the abnormality in his expression. He waved his hand and said, "All right, you can leave now. I'm going to continue recuperating." And Yu bowed and left the secret room. After he left, General Longfu's face darkened and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "And Yu is too meticulous and calculative. He's very similar to Ling Xian of the demon race. In the past few months, he had been in charge of the Heaven End Divine Nation. Without my suppression and jurisdiction, he had taken over half of the Divine Nation. He's used to having power in his hands and doesn't want to give it up. He's even more unwilling to return to my side and become a guard or pawn. If I get rid of all future troubles and completely control the Shenwu continent, I'm afraid that he won't be willing to be left out and will share the world with me, right?" At this point, the dragon-subduing general's lips curled up into a contemptuous sneer. 2 days later, Ji Tianxing returned to the Jotian Tenju Tower. He did not waste any time and directly returned to the 6th level of the distorted spacetime. The various divine fires that had filled the area had already disappeared. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing guessed that Jike's Divine Path Foundation had most likely stabilized. At the very least, she could accurately control her divine power and divine fire without any wastage or leakage. Reality had proven that his guess was correct. When he went to visit Jiku was cultivating and accumulating her strength. She wore a fiery red dress and sat cross-legged in space-time. Her long hair draped behind her head, and her entire body was wrapped in 4 layers of fiery halos. As her breathing rose and fell, there was a vast surge of divine power fluctuating within her body. Of course, the divine power's fluctuations were very stable and powerful, and they were not chaotic or berserk. When she sensed Ji Tianxing's aura, she hurriedly ended her cultivation and opened her eyes. "Big brother Tianxing." Jiku stood up and looked at Ji Tianxing with clear eyes. Her beautiful face revealed a look of anticipation. "You're finally back. I've already stabilized my Divine Path Foundation, controlled 4 divine fires, and comprehended 8 divine abilities. Big brother Tianxing, I don't want to go into seclusion anymore. This time I must fight alongside all of you." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. His tone was playful as he said, "I just came to visit you and didn't say anything. How did you know that I was going to battle? Did Yao Yao tell you everything that happened before?" Jiku was stunned. She shook her head and said, "I was cultivating in seclusion before, so big senior sister didn't disturb me." "That's right, big brother Tianxing, what happened before?" It's a long story." Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment before explaining everything that had happened in detail. After Jiku heard everything, she was both shocked and excited. Her eyes shone even brighter. She couldn't help but praise him. She couldn't wait to say, "That's great. Big brother Tianxing, since you and big senior sister's injuries have healed, what are we waiting for? Let's take advantage of the fact that the dragon-subduing general's injuries haven't healed and quickly attack his nest." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "That's indeed my plan. This matter shouldn't be delayed. However, don't be impatient. I'll go check on the others. Thus, Jiku suppressed her excitement and anticipation, and followed him to visit the others. The two of them first visited the Black Dragon and Qianyu. The two of them were still focused on cultivating. Their strength had already reached the 7th and 8th rank martial sage realm, and they were preparing to break through to the god state. After that, Ji Tianqing brought Jiku to visit the White Dragon and Lan Kuan. The White Dragon did not disappoint Ji Tianqing. He had already refined half of martial god Tianju's spiritual soul. He was no longer a White Dragon shadow. His strength had reached the 9th rank martial sage realm, and he was trying to break through to the god state. Lan Kuan's strength was progressing slower, but he had also reached the 7th rank martial sage realm. The four of them had a high chance of breaking through to the god state. Of course, they still needed a long time. Ji Tianqing did not disturb them. After secretly visiting, he brought Jiku to find Yunyao. After such a long period of rest, Yunyao had already recovered to her peak state. Her strength was stronger than Luo Shui's. In fact, among the three of them, she was the strongest. End of chapter. Chapter 2482. Yunyao had a premonition that the two children were about to be born. However, this was not something that would happen in the near future. It would still take a long time. After the three of them met, Ji Tianqing asked about Yunyao's situation with concern. He was a little hesitant as to whether or not he should bring Yunyao along. However, Yunyao knew that he was ready and was about to take action. Thus, she said with a resolute expression, "Tianqing, I have already recovered to my best condition. You don't have to worry. Although General Long Fu is seriously injured, he is an 8th stage martial god after all. I have to go with you in order to have a chance to kill General Long Fu and completely solve any future problems." Ji Tianqing was a little worried and said in a low voice, "I know all this, but I'm worried that your participation will affect our children." Yunyao shook her head gently. "Chunqin and Ye are not that delicate. Moreover, they have already matured and will not be affected too much. You don't have to persuade me anymore. I will definitely fight alongside you." Seeing that her attitude was so resolute, Ji Tianqing did not say anything else and nodded in agreement. After that, the three of them left Jurchen Ten Absolute's tower and appeared in the ruins of God. Now that the three of them were unparalleled martial gods, their speed was extremely fast. Each step they took covered hundreds of miles. With the glazed fire dragon's strength and speed, it was no longer useful. Thus, the three of them flew high in the sky and rushed to the eastern part of Shenwu continent as fast as lightning. During the journey, Ji Tianqing took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message. When Jiku saw this, he asked, "Brother Tianqing, who did you send a message to? Did you make any arrangements?" Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "In order to ensure that we can successfully kill General Long Fu, I have to use all the available forces. The messengers of the ruins of God cannot leave the ruins of God. Fairy Yuqing has returned to the endless sky sea to cultivate in seclusion. Two of the three divine masters have also fallen. Only martial god Taihao is still alive. I've already discussed it with Taihao and asked him to lend me a hand." It was only then that Jiku understood the reason. He nodded solemnly and said, "The three of us, together with martial god Taihao, should be able to deal with a heavily injured General Fu Long." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and did not say anything. In fact, he was a little worried and had an uneasy premonition. Noon Luoshan Mountain Peak. More than 30 heaven-punishing race warriors in black armor and wielding sabers and swords escorted a dozen human martial artists in ragged clothes and covered in blood to the center of the square. Even though the sky was cloudless and the sun was shining brightly, however, the atmosphere in the plaza was ice-cold, and the aura of death lingered. Everyone stood in the middle of the square and waited silently. The dozen or so human martial artists who were covered in wounds had long been tortured to the point where they no longer looked human. However, they were captured by the Heaven Punisher warriors. They could neither resist nor move. There were men and women, young and old. But they all had one thing in common. They were all former members of Luoshan Mountain. The leader was a hunchbacked old woman with white hair. She was Granny Long. In addition, there were a few older martial artists. They were all elders of Luoshan Mountain. There were also 6 middle-aged men who were once deacons of Luoshan Mountain. There were also 4 young men and women who were once disciples of Luoshan Mountain. Among them were Yiqing Luo, Zhou Bin, and Wen Ring Yu. A year ago they were also handsome and talented martial artists. But now they were all miserable prisoners who had been tortured to the point where their bodies and souls were damaged. Before long, the silence in the plaza was broken. Thud, thud, thud. A series of heavy footsteps came from afar. The footsteps were so heavy that the ground of the plaza started to tremble. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples slowly raised their blood-stained faces and looked toward the palace at the end of the plaza. They saw a ferocious monster that was as large as a mountain walking toward them. The monster with 4 hooves and 2 black dragons on its shoulders was the dragon subduing general. Following closely behind him was An Yu and the 3 silver-armored captains. When they came to the center of the plaza, the 30-odd heaven-punishing race warriors bowed in unison. The dragon subduing general nodded slightly and raised his large palms. The warriors then straightened their backs and held Granny Long and the others firmly in the air. The dragon subduing general looked down at everyone from high above. His lips curled into a sinister smile as he spoke in broken human language. Lowly ants. Do you know why I spared your lowly lives after I took over this territory and didn't kill you? Hearing this, Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples all raised their heads. Everyone stared at the dragon subduing general with bloodshot eyes. Their hearts burned with hatred. The dragon subduing general's gaze swept across the crowd. He sneered and said, "Because 2 very important people are about to return here and reunite with you. And all of you, a bunch of lowly ants, will contribute a little bit of strength to this seat before you die. Use your insignificant lives to give those 2 people a big gift. You are about to be free. You can see your old friends before you die. Are you happy? Ha ha ha." After that, the dragon subduing general looked up to the sky and laughed. Granny Long raised her head with difficulty and stared at him with bloodshot eyes. She shouted in a hoarse voice, "Dragon subduing! You cowardly bastard! Kill us if you have the guts." The second elder also raised his head unyieldingly. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth as he cursed, "Despicable and shameless bastard! Don't you dare use us to threaten the divine master. Even if we die, we will never yield to you." The other elders, deacons, and disciples also began to curse and roar. The dragon subduing general was not angry. He opened his left palm with a sinister smile. Dozens of fist-sized dark red crystals flew out of his huge left palm and floated in the air. The dragon subduing general looked at An Yu behind him and ordered, "Do it." An Yu nodded and walked in front of Granny Long. He sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Old hag, you were the one who screamed the loudest just now. Let's start with you." After that, he slowly stretched out his right hand. 6 sharp fingers opened up and pierced into Granny Long's chest like a knife, grabbing her heart. Pooh! With a muffled sound, Granny Long's heart was dug out by An Yu's right hand. Dark red blood spurted out from the fist-sized bloody hole. The incomparable pain caused Granny Long's body to tremble violently, and she let out a miserable scream. But she was a martial sage and did not die on the spot. An Yu waved his hand and took a dark red crystal from the air, and stuffed it into the hole in Granny Long's chest. Then, he formed a few hand seals and shot out a few dark red rays of light that enveloped Granny Long's body. Under the horrified and angry gazes of the crowd, Granny Long gradually fell into a coma, and the hole in her chest quickly healed. End of chapter. Chapter 2483. In the blink of an eye, Granny Long's injuries were healed. Other than being unconscious, there was nothing wrong with her. Not long after, she woke up. Her eyes were cloudy, and her body was bent as she stood. Even when the 2 black-armored guards let her go, she did not struggle or run away. She stood there like a puppet. On the surface, she looked the same as before. But the elders, deacons, and disciples could clearly feel that she had changed. She had become muddle-headed and had no thoughts of her own. She was like a puppet being controlled by someone. This scene made the elders, deacons, and disciples feel deeply worried and fearful. The second elder, who was closest to Granny Long, shouted angrily, "Bastard! What did you do to Granny Long?" What he asked was what everyone wanted to know. But General Long and Yu would not answer. And Yu sneered and said in a mocking tone, "You want to know the answer? Why don't you try it yourself?" As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his right hand. His sharp fingers pierced into the second elder's chest. He was slow because he wanted to let the second elder feel the pain of having his heart cut out. Blarg. And Yu dug out a warm, bright red heart that was covered in blood. He squeezed hard with his right hand, and the heart exploded into a cloud of blood. The second elder screamed and fainted from the pain. And Yu took out a dark red crystal and stuffed it into the second elder's chest. Then, he cast a few more blood rays into the second elder's body. Not long after, the unconscious second elder woke up and became as stiff as Granny Long. Next, the elders were tortured one by one. Their hearts were cut out. Then it was the deacons and a few young disciples. After a few minutes, everyone's hearts were cut out and a dark red crystal was planted in their bodies. And Yu nodded slightly and smiled. He seemed to be very satisfied with his masterpiece. General Long said in a dignified tone, "And Yu, I'll leave everything here to you. You must make arrangements for them. I've used 16 slaughter crystals. I must see the results." And Yu quickly turned around and bowed. He said confidently, "General, don't worry. I will do my best." The dragon-subduing general didn't say anything more. He turned around and returned to the palace. After he left, and Yu ordered the black-armored guards, "Men, tie these lowly commoners to the stake." More than 30 black-armored guards hurriedly escorted everyone to the high platform in the middle of the square. The 300-meter-tall stone platform had been built not long ago, and a powerful divine formation had been set up. On the high platform, 16 thick and sturdy bronze pillars stood erect. Their surface was covered with sharp thorns, blades, and sawteeth. That evening, the surrounding tens of thousands of miles around the Luotian mountain was covered by dark clouds. Not a single ray of sunlight could be seen. The world was dark and eerily silent. Even the air seemed to have stopped flowing. A formless feeling of oppression lingered in everyone's hearts. Those who were weaker and didn't have enough mental fortitude were actually pressured to the point that they couldn't breathe. At this moment, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the sky above the Luotian mountain. Crack! Following a crisp shattering sound, a wide crack was torn open in the sky by the golden light. 3 figures passed through the golden light and flew out of the crack. They stood in the sky above the mountain and looked down at the mountain peak with cold expressions. They were 3 handsome and peerlessly beautiful young men and women. The young man standing in the middle was wearing a white robe with silver-rimmed cloud patterns. He had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes and an extraordinary aura. There was a stunning beauty on each side of him. One was wearing a fiery red dress and looked delicate and charming. The other was wearing a moon-white dress and looked cold and noble. Without a doubt, these 3 people were Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yu Niao. Before the operation started, Ji Tianqing had learned a lot of information from Taihao Yunqi. He knew that the dragon-subduing general had occupied the Luotian mountain and treated it as his base. Therefore, there was an 80% chance that the dragon-subduing general was hiding on the Luotian mountain to recuperate. Ji Tianqing released his divine perception and enveloped the entire mountain peak. He began to investigate the situation on the mountain peak and search for traces of the dragon-subduing general. At that moment, Yu Niao's expression suddenly changed. She pointed at the square on the mountain peak and said with a frown, "Look." Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku looked in the direction of the voice and their gazes landed on the high platform in the middle of the square. They saw 16 ferocious-looking copper pillars standing on the stone platform that was 1,000 feet tall. There were 16 human martial artists in ragged clothes and covered in blood tied to the copper pillars. They were unable to resist or move. At that moment, 16 black-armored Heaven Punisher warriors were waving long whips that flickered with lightning as they whipped the human martial artists continuously. As crisp cracking sounds rang out, lightning flashed on the high platform and blood splattered everywhere. The 16 human martial artists were tortured until they were covered in cuts and bruises. They were on the verge of death and constantly let out hoarse and desperate cries. Even though the high platform was covered in a layer of blood-red light, it could not block the dull sounds of the long whips whipping their bodies. Upon seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing, Yu Niao, and Ji Ku's faces darkened, and a cold light surged from their eyes. Yunyao recognized the white-haired old woman tied to one of the copper pillars. Her pupils constricted, and she was so angry that her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Tianxing, look, that's Grandma Long. There are also a few elders deacons, Yiqing Luo Zobin and one Ring Yu. Those 16 people are all from the Luoshan mountain. Yunyao's voice trembled. She was angry and heartbroken, seeing her former companion and friend, Grandma Long, being tortured so miserably. She felt a stabbing pain in her heart, and her body also trembled. Ji Tianxing also felt the same way. His chest burned with rage, and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. He had not interacted much with those elders, deacons, and disciples. However, in his memory, the disciples of the Luoshan mountain were very kind and respectful to him, especially Grandma Long. She treated him like a nephew and trusted him. She had helped him a lot. Damn those heaven punishers. They invaded the Luoshan mountain, captured the disciples of the Luoshan mountain, and tortured them like this. Today, I will bathe the Luoshan mountain in blood and kill all the heaven punishers. Ji Tianxing gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. His figure flashed as he charged toward the high platform in the middle of the square. Swoosh! In the next instant he charged onto the high platform and punched out with both fists. Two gigantic phantoms of dragons and elephants, which were as large as mountains, hit the blood-red light barrier with a loud bang. Kaboom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, countless blood-red light fragments burst out and covered the sky. The blood-red light barrier formed by the divine-level defensive array could not withstand the power of the dragon-elephant divine fist, and was shattered on the spot. End of chapter. Chapter 2484. Violent shockwaves spread out from the peak of Luoshan Mountain. The entire mountain shook and the square in a radius of 100 miles shook violently. Numerous cracks formed in the ground. The houses and buildings around the square were smashed into smithereens, leaving behind a mess of ruins. The sudden turn of events caused all the black armored guards on the high platform to be stunned in place. Everyone turned their heads to look at Ji Tianxing, their faces filled with shock. Bam! Ji Tianxing descended from the sky and landed on the high platform. He looked around and swept his cold gaze across the black armored bodyguards. His body was filled with killing intent. All of you beasts, go to hell! Ji Tianxing shouted angrily. He raised his hands and shot out dozens of starry sword radiance at lightning speed. Swoosh! 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 More than 60 starry sword radiance shot out from the high platform like a rain of arrows and shot toward the 16 black armored bodyguards. The black armored bodyguards were martial sages and they had expected the attack and were prepared for it. When the starry sword radiance appeared, they did not hesitate to teleport away and run away. However, their speed was still too slow. Dozens of starry sword lights immediately caught up with them and pierced their bodies with a loud bang. Bam! 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 There was a series of explosions and the bodies of the black armored bodyguards were smashed into smithereens and scattered in the sky. Only 3 of the black armored bodyguards were spared, and they managed to avoid being smashed into smithereens. The black armored bodyguards' limbs were chopped off and they screamed in pain as they fell onto the square. Before Ji Tianxing could chase after the black armored bodyguards, Yunyao descended from the sky. She waved her shadowless dual swords and shot out dozens of cold radiances. Swoosh! 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 15 crescent-shaped sword radiance hit the 3 black armored bodyguards. Instantly, the 3 black armored bodyguards followed in the footsteps of their companions. Their bodies were smashed into smithereens and they fell onto the ruins. The black armored guards who executed Granny Long and the others had all turned into ashes. Only then did Yunyao's anger dissipate a lot. Ji Tianxing turned around and walked toward Granny Dragon. His hands glowed with golden sword lights as he slashed at the chains on the bronze pillars. 2 thick bronze chains bound Granny Long tightly. Ding! Ding! With 2 crisp sounds, the 2 bronze chains were cut in half by the sword light and fell to the ground. Ji Tianxing walked in front of Granny Long and said with a complicated expression, "Granny Long, I'm sorry we're late." Granny Long's body was bent over, and her blood-stained silver hair covered her face. She wanted to take a step towards Ji Tianxing, but her footsteps faltered, and she fell to the ground. Ji Tianqing subconsciously reached out his hands to help her up. At this moment, Jike's shout came from 1,000 feet behind him. Wait! Ji Tianqing stopped and turned to look at Jiku with a questioning expression. Jike quickly shook his head and explained with a serious expression, Big Brother Tianqing, Granny Long and these people are a little strange. There's something wrong with them. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were stunned. They stared at the elders and disciples and carefully observed them. When they saw Granny Long and the others being tortured, they were extremely angry and neglected the details. After all, Granny Long and the others' faces were covered in blood, and their hair was disheveled. They looked like they were on the brink of death. Now that Jiku reminded them, the two of them realized that something was wrong. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples' eyes were lifeless and cloudy. It looked as if he had lost his mind, his thoughts and his consciousness. Oh no, I'm afraid we've been tricked. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. He had a bad feeling about this. However, before he could leave the high platform, something unexpected happened. Granny Long, the elders, and the disciples' bodies lit up with blood-red light and suddenly exploded. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion suddenly burst out, piercing through the 9 heavens and resounding for thousands of miles. 16 people exploded at the same time, and their bodies were blasted into powder. However, an endless dark red light burst out from their bodies, instantly drowning the high platform and covering the sky for hundreds of miles. The overwhelming dark red light gathered into a huge blood-red ball of light that rose into the sky like a flame. The entire Luotian mountain was enveloped by the blood-red light. Within 1,000 miles, there was only the blood-red light between heaven and earth, like a sea of fire. There was no doubt that the entire high platform was blasted into powder. Even the entire square and all the houses and buildings on the mountain peak were razed to the ground and turned into dust. Ji Tianqing was also hit by the terrifying explosion and was sent flying. Swoosh! He was covered in blood as he tumbled in the air, drawing an arc in the sky as he flew to the edge of the cliff 100 miles away. Although he sensed the danger, he circulated his energy to the maximum, and used a defensive superpower to form a dark golden shield on the surface of his body. However, the destructive power of the explosion still shattered the dark golden shield. He was covered in wounds and more than 30 wounds and cracks appeared on his body. Golden divine blood spurted out and soaked his white robe. Boom! Ji Tianqing crashed into the ruins at the edge of the cliff with a dull thud, creating a deep pit in the ground and sending dirt and rocks into the sky. Although Yunyao was not on the high platform, she was very close to it. She was also sent flying by the blood-red light. Fortunately, she was wearing the dark golden divine armor, which reduced the power of the explosion by 60 to 70%. Moreover, her strength had reached the LV6 martial god realm. Therefore, she was only slightly injured and did not suffer any serious injuries. After she fell into the ruins, she immediately got up and rushed to Ji Tianqing worriedly to check on Ji Tianqing's injuries. As for Jiku, she was the furthest away from the high platform and had already sensed that something was wrong. When the blood-red light exploded, she had already used her superpower to form a golden and red fireball to protect herself. However, she was still sent flying dozens of miles away and crashed into the ruins. The divine fireball had collapsed, and she had also suffered internal injuries. Her face was pale and a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. In the blink of an eye, the sacred and majestic Luotian mountain had become a charred ruin. A few ravines appeared on the mountain and countless rocks collapsed. The mountain peak was on the verge of collapse. The dust and blood-red light that blotted out the sky gradually thinned and dissipated. Jiku and Yunyao ignored their injuries and flew to Ji Tianqing's side. Cough, cough. Ji Tianqing crawled out of the ruins and coughed violently before he staggered to his feet. His long hair was draped behind his head and his body was covered in blood and dirt. However, a dazzling golden light burst out from his body and immediately shook off the dust on his body. Damn the dragon-subduing general. He is indeed despicable. He lifted his sleeve to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked at the sky sharply and shouted with a murderous aura. Although he looked miserable with more than 30 wounds on his body, these injuries were not serious. But in reality, this injury was nothing, and it did not affect him from continuing to fight. After all, he had an extremely powerful and unique divine body. Chapter 2485. Seeing that Ji Tianqing was fine, Yunyao and Jiku were relieved. At this moment, in the northern skies of the Luotian mountain, an arrogant and tyrannical laughter rang out. Ha 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 ha! The sound came from the sky like thunder. Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and Jiku looked up and saw a monster as big as a mountain flying toward them from afar. This monster was half human and half beast. Its entire body was covered in black armor, and two ferocious black dragons extended from its shoulders. He was the dragon-subduing general. Behind him were several hundred black-armored warriors of the heaven-punishing clan. They formed a mighty group. Naturally, there were also 7 martial god-level powerhouses in silver armor among them, and Yu was among them. These were the elites of the heaven punishers. The remaining 1,000 or so black-armored warriors were guarding the territories of the Luo River and Tianju divine kingdoms. The dragon-subduing general came to the sky above Luotian Mountain and looked down at Ji Tianqing and the other two. Seeing that the 3 of them were in a sorry state and were injured, he smirked. Ji Tianqing, are you satisfied with the surprise I prepared for you? Ji Tianqing sneered. Despicable and shameless alien race. You only know how to use such despicable tricks. It's a pity that your trap is too weak. It can only tickle me. Is that so? The dragon-subduing general was not angry. Instead, he continued to smirk. Those 16 human worms were your friends and comrades. You must be very angry to see them turn into ashes with your own eyes, right? Ji Tianqing nodded. That's right. I am very angry. That's why I will kill all the heaven punishers and leave no one alive. That's the only way I can comfort their souls in heaven. Ha! General Dragon Fu roared with laughter, his face full of disdain. What nonsense! What shameless boasting! Ji Tianqing slowly raised his right hand. A black light flashed in his palm, and he took out the burial of heaven. Cut the crap. General Dragon Subduing, your death is here. Hand over your life. Ji Tianqing coldly snorted. His left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand waved the burial of heaven, valiantly slashing out a sword strike. Heaven-splitting sword. The sword of burial of heaven unleashed a giant sword that was 10,000 feet long and shone with golden light. It tore through the sky and slashed towards General Dragon Subduing. The dragon-subduing general's expression didn't change. He raised his huge palms and slapped out a dark red light, facing the giant sword. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the gigantic sword shattered into millions of golden shards and scattered in the sky. That earth-shattering dark red light was also cut into pieces. At the same time, Yu pulled out his pitch-black saber and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Warriors of the Heaven Punishers, listen up! Kill them at all costs!" The few silver-armored captains and hundreds of Heaven Punisher warriors all raised their weapons and roared like thunder. Kill! Kill them all! Leave no one alive! Tear Ji Tianqing into pieces! Then Yu and the few silver-armored captains flew out and charged towards Jiku and Yunyao without any regard for their own safety. Hundreds of black-armored warriors surged forward like a black tide and surrounded the two of them. Meanwhile, Ji Tianqing and General Dragon Subduing both flew thousands of miles away and started their battle. Ji Tianqing, without the help of the old man of the divine ruins and fairy Yu Qing, how are you going to fight me? As he spoke, General Dragon Subduing waved his palms and unleashed a barrage of sharp blood-red blades that shot towards Ji Tianqing like a rain of arrows. At the same time, the 2 black dragons on his shoulders also spat out a series of dark red fireballs that shot towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing waved the burial of heaven and unleashed a barrage of sword light to block General Dragon Subduing's attack. At the same time, he unleashed the shadow of a dragon and elephant to counterattack. Dragon Subduing, you were severely injured previously and lost a lot of your strength. How much have you recovered? Even without the help of the 2 seniors, killing you is as easy as slaughtering a dog. The endless blood-red blades and dark red fireballs collided with the dazzling golden sword light and the shadow of a dragon and elephant, resulting in an earth-shattering boom. All sorts of blades, fireballs, and shadows collapsed, turning into millions of light fragments that rained down from the sky like a torrential downpour. In just a short period of time, Ji Tianqing and General Dragon Subduing had exchanged more than 300 blows. Neither of them had the upper hand, nor were they injured. They were actually evenly matched. Such an outcome made Ji Tianqing feel more at ease. He was even more certain that General Dragon Subduing had not recovered his strength. General Dragon Subduing's expression did not change, but he was actually filled with shock and disbelief. Damn it! How long has it been since the last battle? Not only has he recovered from his injuries in such a short period of time, but his strength has also increased by several folds. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, General Dragon Subduing said in a low voice, Ji Tianqing, it's really rare for a genius like you to appear in this ignorant and closed-off world. It's a pity that you shouldn't have gone against me, much less my race. Do you know that my race has always been invincible in the purple cloud star zone, sweeping through hundreds of worlds? This 5 elements world will definitely bow down to my race. If you persist in going about things the wrong way, only death awaits you. I'll advise you one last time. Stop immediately and you can still keep your life. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a disdainful sneer. Haha, did I hear wrongly? General Dragon Subduing, who was so arrogant just now, is actually cowardly in admitting defeat? If you kneel down and surrender now and kowtow to me 100 times, perhaps I will spare your worthless life. But you are so stupid that it's laughable. You actually used the Heaven Punisher race to threaten me? Do you know that I once controlled thousands of deities and ruled over 3,000 worlds? Everywhere I went, the deities and living beings bowed to me. The so-called Heaven Punisher race doesn't even have the right to kneel to me. Such arrogant words were a great humiliation and provocation to General Dragon Subduing. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. His eyes turned blood red and blazed with flames. Ji Tianqing, you are too arrogant. General Dragon Subduing roared in rage. So what if you were once a supreme being? Now you are just an empty god. In front of a real deity, you are as weak as an ant. Moreover, thousands of years have passed. The world today is no longer the era you were in back then. The Heaven Punisher race has received the deity's decree and unified the entire purple cloud star zone. This is a trend that no one can reverse. If you swear to be a mantis that blocks a car, you will only be crushed. As he roared, General Dragon Subduing struck out with a bloody light that turned into a giant palm and slammed down. Ji Tianqing hurriedly used his ultimate sword skill to block the attack. Hundreds of dazzling golden sword radiances pierced through the giant palm. His robes fluttered as he laughed domineeringly. Receive the deity's decree? I am a deity, the king of deities. Dragon Subduing, why don't you ask your Heaven Punisher race to kneel and listen to my decree? End of chapter. Chapter 2486. Ji Tianqing's words angered General Dragon Subduing so much that he almost vomited blood. Originally, he wanted to use the Heaven Punisher race and the Celestial Court behind them to threaten Ji Tianqing. This way, he could get rid of Ji Tianqing without shedding a drop of blood and easily occupy the 5 elements world. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing did not care about the Heaven Punisher race at all. Even the deities of the upper realm could not pose any threat to Ji Tianqing. General Dragon Subduing was at his wits' end. Since he could not persuade Ji Tianqing to surrender, he could only fight until the end and kill him. He was filled with rage as he used his divine powers and ultimate skills, attacking ferociously without regard for anything else. Ji Tianqing counterattacked calmly. He used all kinds of divine powers and ultimate skills as he fought with General Dragon Subduing in the sky. The two of them fought fiercely. All kinds of divine powers flashed continuously, illuminating a radius of a few thousand miles. The sky was also shattered, revealing hundreds of thousands of pitch-black cracks. The violent and devastating shockwaves were like rings of multicolored ripples that kept spreading outwards, looking exceptionally gorgeous. 3,000 miles away, at the peak of the Luotian mountain, An Yu and 6 silver-armored captains led hundreds of elite warriors to besiege Yun Yao and Ji Ku. More than 600 black-armored warriors formed a huge encirclement, sealing off an area of 100 miles. They formed a six-pointed star battle formation, and their powers merged. They released a dark red light that covered the sky, suppressing Yunyao and Jiku. With every breath, hundreds and thousands of blood-red blades would shoot out like a rain of arrows, drowning the two of them. Yunyao wore her dark gold divine armor, and her defense was unparalleled. She could ignore the black-armored warriors' attacks. She waved her shadowless dual swords with a cold expression, and sword shadows filled the sky as she fought with the silver-armored captains. Starfall. Milky Way ribbon. Boom, 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 boom. Beams of starry sword light collided with the blood-red light in the sky, creating a deafening sound that reverberated in the sky. Several silver-armored captains were forced back by her attacks, and only then did they manage to block her attacks with all their might. Not long after, the armors of the captains were penetrated. All of them were heavily injured, and their bodies were stained with blood. On the other side, Jiku was fighting within Yu and the two silver-armored captains. Her entire body was engulfed in golden divine flames, and a pair of phoenix wings materialized behind her back, making her appear especially holy and noble. On her left wrist, she wore a string of sparkling starlight beads, releasing a starlight shield to firmly protect herself. No matter how many bloody blades slashed at her, they were unable to break through her starlight shield and hurt her at all. She stared at Yu and the others with a serious face. She performed a series of hand seals and released the divine flames of different colors. Heaven-burningly fire. Flames of nirvana. The Nanming primordial fire covered the sky and engulfed Yu and the two captains, burning them black all over. Immediately after, the golden flames of nirvana surged out and turned into 3 pillars of fire that blasted Yu and the others. Boom! 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 And Yu and the two silver-armored captains were sent flying, and blood gushed out of their mouths and noses. Although Yunyao and Jiku were surrounded by hundreds of people, and the difference in numbers between the two sides was huge. However, the two of them were very powerful, and they were not at a disadvantage at all. The battle lasted for about half an hour, and there was still no clear victor. Jiku and Yunyao were not injured, but Yu and the other captains were all covered in dust, and they were in a miserable state. Dozens of the hundreds of black-armored warriors were also killed by the shockwaves of the battle. The terrifying shockwaves spread in all directions, and soon destroyed the Luotian mountain. The 10,000-meter-tall mountain finally collapsed under the weight of the shockwaves. The mountain collapsed into a huge pile of rubble, and endless smoke and dust flew everywhere. The ground within 1,000 miles shook from the shockwaves, and there were cracks everywhere. Just as the two sides were in the midst of a fierce battle, a dazzling golden divine light suddenly lit up in the sky not far away. Swoosh! That divine light streaked across the sky like lightning, and it instantly traversed 300 miles and arrived at the peak of the Luotian mountain. At that moment, the divine light split into 4 and turned into 4 dazzling guillotines that were thousands of feet long, and they slashed into the crowd. Boom! 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 Following the 4 earth-shattering explosions, a dazzling golden light burst out from the crowd, and countless pieces of corpses and blood splattered everywhere. At least hundreds of black-armored warriors were killed on the spot by the guillotines. The sudden change made the expressions of the black-armored warriors and Yu and the others stiffen. Fear flashed in their eyes. Everyone knew that the powerful human cultivators had come to their aid. Yu and the other captains quickly retreated and put up a defensive and alert posture. The remaining hundreds of black-armored warriors also quickly shrank their formation, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Seeing this, Yunyao and Jiku exchanged looks. They both understood what was going on. They could both guess that the human martial god who had come to their aid was martial god Taihao. As expected, a giant crack appeared in the sky 100 miles to the south, and a sacred golden light lit up. Swoosh! A burly figure passed through the crack and appeared in the sky. It was a middle-aged man wearing golden armor and a purple cloak. It was martial god Taihao. He held a golden broadsword that was as wide as a bench in his hand. He looked coldly at the heaven-punishing warriors and shouted coldly as he charged over. Swoosh! He waved his golden broadsword, and golden light shadows filled the sky as they fell on the heaven-punishing warriors. Bam! 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 Instantly, more than 30 black-armored warriors could not dodge in time and were sliced into pieces by the golden sword shadows. Blood mixed with the pieces of corpses fell from the sky, giving off a thick smell of blood. The hundreds of black-armored warriors' expressions turned extremely ugly. Their eyes were filled with fear and helplessness as they all retreated. Marshal Gott Taihao took the opportunity to charge into the crowd. Like a ferocious tiger in a flock of sheep, he started a massacre. Yunyao and Jiku also took the opportunity to attack Yu and the captains with all their might. A cold light covers heaven and earth, and two sleeves shake the starry sky. Yunyao moved mysteriously as she waved the shadowless sword with both hands. Her sleeves fluttered, and sword light filled the sky like a fairy scattering flowers. Jiku raised her left hand and slapped toward Yu. 9 rings of starlight appeared, suppressing Yu and the two captains. She made a strange hand seal with her right hand. Her index and middle fingers pierced toward the two captains, and 2 beams of white flames shot out. Swoosh! Swoosh! The 2 beams of white flames were like spears. They instantly pierced through the sky, piercing through the 2 captains' silver armor and into their chests. Bam! Bam! Instantly, the scales on the 2 captains' chests shattered, and their bodies exploded. Thousands of pieces of flesh mixed with purple blood fell from the sky, but they were burned to ashes by the divine fire before they fell to the ground. Thus Yunyao, Jiku, and Marshal Gott Taihao firmly held the upper hand. And Yu, the captains, and the black-armored warriors were all terrified, and their morale was low. They retreated into the distance as they resisted the three's attacks. Chapter 2487. As time passed, everyone's battlefield also changed. And Yu and hundreds of black-armored soldiers retreated to the north for about 5,000 miles. During this process, more than half of the 600 black-armored soldiers were killed by Marshal Gott Taihao. Only about 100 were left. 2 of the 6 captains were killed by Jiku and 2 by Yunyao. The 2 captains who survived were also severely injured. They followed Yu, who was also severely injured, and ran away in panic. The outcome was decided. Yunyao and Jiku were both worried about Ji Tianqing's safety. They wanted to leave the battlefield and help Ji Tianqing. However, only one of them could leave. Otherwise, it would be difficult for Marshal Gott Taihao to kill Yu, 2 captains, and more than 100 black-armored soldiers. At this critical moment, Yunyao looked at Jiku with determined eyes and said, "Kuku, you and Taihao go after these soldiers. I'll help Tianqing take care of General Dragon Fu." Seeing her determined attitude, Jiku could only nod after hesitating for a while. After all, now was not the time to argue about who should help. Yunyao was stronger. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Yunyao turned around and left. She rushed thousands of miles away at lightning speed to help Ji Tianqing. Jiku didn't waste any time. He used all his strength to cast more than 30 nirvana flames. Bam! 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 With a series of muffled sounds, the dazzling golden nirvana flames hit more than 30 black-armored soldiers. Instantly, those black-armored soldiers were smashed into pieces. The pieces of flesh that splattered in the sky were also burned to ashes by the nirvana flames. Marshal Gott Taihao caught up with Yu. He waved his sword and cast 49 sword lights, blocking Yu's path. Yu could only cast a spell to block it. He formed a bloodlight shield while throwing out palm shadows. Bang! Bang! The palm shadows and sword lights clashed, creating a thunderous sound that shook the sky. All the palm shadows were shattered, but the sword lights didn't weaken. They hit the bloodlight shield. Crack! The bloodlight shield collapsed, turning into fragments that scattered all over the sky. Yu's golden armor was dented and chipped by the sword light. Blood spurted out of the gaps. Before he could turn around and escape, Jiku charged at him again. Sacred Flame Divine Finger. Jiku clenched his sword fingers and channeled the holy flame in his body to form 2 blinding golden sword auras that pierced towards Yu's chest and head. The 2 fiery golden swords instantly arrived in front of Yu with unparalleled power. At the critical moment, Yu held the black saber with both hands and blocked in front of his chest. Boom! A holy flame golden sword struck the saber and shattered. exploding into a sky full of golden flames. The other holy flame golden sword pierced Yu's head without any hindrance. Boom! With a muffled explosion, Yu's head exploded on the spot, splashing out countless pieces of brain matter. Then a strange scene appeared. Yu's head exploded, but he didn't die on the spot. He screamed in pain and roared in anger. He waved his saber wildly and charged at Jiku without any fear of death. Swish, swish, swish. He waved his saber and unleashed dozens of bloody lights that enveloped Jiku's body. He wanted to take her down with him. Jiku didn't panic. She cast a spell with her left hand and channeled the power of the heavenly star chain to form an extremely sturdy shield. Boom, 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 boom. Dozens of blood-red lights pierced the shield and exploded with a deafening sound. The blood-red light fragments filled the sky. But the shield was indestructible, and Jiku wasn't hurt. She took the opportunity to raise her right hand and unleashed a fiery palm the size of a mountain, slamming it towards Yu. Phoenix cry of the 9 heavens. Within the crimson flame palm, there was actually a phantom of a phoenix fluttering in the air. Its posture was incomparably majestic, and it let out a clear cry towards the sky. Boom! The giant flaming palm slammed into Yu, creating an earth-shattering explosion that shook the 9 heavens. Yu's headless body could no longer withstand the divine power and exploded into a pile of flesh and blood. Swish! Crimson divine flames swept across the sky, burning the flesh and blood that were falling from the sky into ashes. The dozen or so black-armored warriors who were relatively close to him were also burned to death by the crimson divine flames and turned into ashes. The 2 surviving captains and the hundreds of black-armored soldiers were scared out of their wits when they saw Yu being killed. Their fighting spirit completely disappeared. They were truly terrified. They didn't dare to fight back anymore. They all scattered and ran away. So Jiku and Taihao split up to chase after them. After about 100 breaths of time, the 2 of them had successfully killed the 2 captains. Then they chased after the fleeing black-armored warriors. In the sky 10,000 feet above the ground, Ji Tianqing and General Dragon subduing continued to teleport, clashing again and again. Boom! 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 Every time they clashed, there would be an earth-shattering explosion and a dazzling divine light that spread out like a halo. The sky was collapsing, and cracks and holes appeared one after another. In the pitch-black void, a violent black storm descended and raged in the sky. Even though Ji Tianqing and General Dragon were powerful, they didn't dare to touch those void storms. 45 minutes passed. The 2 of them had exchanged tens of thousands of blows, but there was still no winner. Ji Tianqing's black robe had long turned into ashes and dissipated. Now he was in the celestial dragon tyrant body state and turned into a golden giant 100 meters tall. His upper body was naked and covered in golden dragon scales. His long hair fluttered in the wind. His strong and perfect body was covered with crisscrossing wounds, and golden blood kept seeping out. Even the left side of his face had a wound that was more than 10 feet long, extending all the way to his neck. Even though he was badly injured, he didn't show any signs of exhaustion or weakness. Instead, his aura was even more domineering and valiant. He was like a primordial beast, his entire body filled with violent killing intent, erupting with terrifying power. Even though General Dragon was as huge as a mountain and was dozens of times bigger than him, his aura wasn't any weaker. Swoosh! His figure flashed and crossed hundreds of miles in an instant, charging in front of General Dragon. He held the 100-meter-long sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed down from the sky toward General Dragon's head. In a split second, General Dragon's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, he raised his palms and clamped down on the sword of burial of heaven. Ah! When the sword of burial of heaven was only 10 feet away from his head, it was clamped down by his huge palms and couldn't move anymore. Ji Tianqing clenched his teeth and desperately activated his divine power. He held the sword of burial of heaven and pressed it down. However, General Dragon also released his strongest power and tried his best to hold on. He didn't allow the sword of burial of heaven to move at all. The 2 of them were in a stalemate high in the sky. Violent energy surged around them and lit up with resplendent light. The two of them were competing on the strength and foundation of their divine power. Whoever couldn't hold on first would lose. At this critical moment, a pure white figure quietly appeared behind General Dragon, subduing. Chapter 2488. The white figure that suddenly appeared was graceful, cold, and noble. It was Yun Yao. Her face was as cold as ice. She held a divine sword in each hand, and a sharp murderous intent flashed across her eyes. Without hesitation, she waved her two swords and unleashed her most violent divine power, stabbing toward the back of the dragon, subduing general. Swoosh! The two swords stabbed forward, but there was no dazzling sword light or colorful scene. There were only two invisible sword lights that were hundreds of feet long. They pierced toward the dragon, subduing general's shoulders in an indestructible manner. The next moment, the dragon subduing general realized that something was wrong. A chill ran down his spine. He was filled with anxiety and anger, but he couldn't turn around to block. Otherwise, he would be injured by Ji Tianxing. At this critical moment, the two black dragons on his shoulders suddenly turned their heads and opened their bloody mouths, about to spit out endless blood. However, the two black dragons were still one step too slow. Bam! Bam! The two silent sword lights stabbed the two black dragons, creating a deafening sound. Instantly, the heads of the two black dragons exploded. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. The extremely violent impact made the dragon subduing general tremble all over. The pain of the two black dragons' heads being smashed made him twitch all over. His expression also became ferocious and frightening. Under the pain, his power was slightly delayed, and he couldn't resist Ji Tianxing's suppression. His wide palms could no longer clamp down on the burial of heaven's sword. Bam! The heaven barrier sword fiercely slashed down and struck his broad head, causing a loud bang that sounded like muffled thunder to erupt. The dragon subduing general's head was covered with dense black scales and a thick layer of bones. However, the burial of heaven's sword shattered dozens of dragon scales, broke through the hard and sturdy bones, and embedded itself in his head. 100-meter-long gully appeared, and purple blood gushed out from the wound like a fountain. Ah! The heart-wrenching pain caused General Dragon subduing to shudder. He couldn't help but cry out in agony. He looked up at the sky and glared at Ji Tianxing with a venomous look in his eyes. Then, he raised both of his palms and shot out two dark red light beams. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing decisively pulled out the sword of burial of heaven and placed it in front of him. Bang bang! Amidst the loud noise, two dark red light pillars struck the heaven barrier sword and sent him flying. The terrifying force of impact sent him flying a full 200 miles before he stopped in the sky. With great difficulty he stabilized his body. Holding the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, he panted heavily. After his chaotic divine power calmed down, he once again charged towards General Dragon, subduing with his sword. At the same time, Yun Yao stood high up in the sky, looking down at General Dragon, subduing with a cold expression. She slowly waved her shadowless sword with both hands, drawing out mysterious arcs. As the sword radiance flashed, heaven and earth within a radius of tens of thousands of miles became silent and oppressive. It was as if it had been sealed. Under Yun Yao's control, the boundless power of heaven and earth gathered in the dual swords. At this moment her white robes fluttered in the wind. She was unparalleled and holy, like the reincarnation of the goddess of light. She was sacred, noble, and extremely powerful. The power of heaven and earth, the radiance of the sun and moon, yin and yang, the five elements, and the cycle of heaven and earth will never end. Great universe sword. Yun Yao was expressionless as she shouted in a sacred and dignified tone. As her voice fell, she held the shadowless dual swords with both hands and slashed at General Dragon, subduing. Two huge universe swords instantly appeared in the sky. One was black and the other was white. At that moment, General Dragon, subduing was under unparalleled pressure. It was as if he was being suppressed by heaven and earth. He couldn't move at all. He tried his best to lift his head, but his body was hunched over. The black dragon scales all over his body cracked and blood spurted out. The power of the black and white swords made him feel fear and apprehension from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't believe that this was a magical technique that a martial god could use. Damn it! Only a true god can use such a magical technique. Didn't Yunyao just break through to the martial god realm? How could she have mastered such a terrifying magical technique? These thoughts flashed through General Dragon Subduing's mind. He was extremely puzzled. But now wasn't the time to think about this. It was more important to stay alive. He hurriedly curled up his body. The black dragon scales all over his body moved rapidly, forming a sturdy and thick armor to protect his body. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and roared furiously. Endless bloody light burst out from his body and formed a bloody shield. The great Qiankuan sword finally landed just as the blood-red barrier was formed. Kaboom! A thunderous sound exploded in the sky, shaking tens of thousands of miles. The huge universe sword instantly shattered the bloody shield and slashed down on General Dragon Subduing's body. The sturdy and thick black dragon scales were shattered by the giant sword on the spot, splashing out countless fragments. A stream of purple hot blood gushed out like a water column. Under the illumination of the white light, it bloomed with a brilliant purple light. Roar! The incomparable pain caused General Dragon Subduing to involuntarily let out an earth-shattering howl. He was suppressed by the great universe sword. He fell from the sky and smashed onto the ground, causing smoke and dust to fly up. He created a huge pit with a radius of 100 miles in the ruins that had been razed to the ground. Endless dust rained down, drowning his body. Ji Tianqing was stunned by such a terrifying scene. He looked at Yunyao in disbelief. I can't believe that Yao Yao can use such a monarch-level magical technique when she is only a martial god. It's really terrifying. Ji Tianqing's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. With his eyesight and knowledge, he could tell that the Great Universe Sword was a monarch-level magical technique. If a monarch-level magical technique had been used, it would have been able to split half a continent. Ji Tianqing was shocked. Yunyao, who was high up in the sky, looked calm. It was as if she was used to it. She frowned and looked down. Her gaze passed through the smoke and dust and stared at the deep pit on the ground. Suddenly, she saw something strange in the deep pit. She frowned and shouted coldly, "Dragon Subduing. At this point you still want to run away." As she shouted, she rushed into the deep pit and stabbed General Dragon Subduing with her two swords. General Dragon Subduing didn't struggle to get up after he fell into the deep pit. He took out a pitch-black disc and released a dark red beam of light into the disc. Instantly, the round plate emitted a bright bloody light. Circles of ripples lit up and protected him. He grabbed a black stone with his left hand and absorbed its divine power. Swoosh! There was a flash of light and General Dragon Subduing's huge body was sucked into the black disc. In the next moment, the black disc flashed with a bloody light. It teleported 2,000 miles and disappeared. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's expressions changed. A cold light flashed in their eyes. Damn it! He still has a trump card. Chase! The two of them looked at each other and used their teleportation divine power without hesitation. They also teleported 2,000 miles away to chase after General Dragon Subduing. Chapter 2489. A powerful cultivator like the Dragon Subduing General would naturally have all sorts of life-saving trump cards. Moreover, he was the leader of the Heaven Punisher Army and the captain of the Third Fleet. Seeing that the situation was not good, it was normal for him to take out a mysterious Dharma treasure to escape. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had expected this, but it was difficult to prevent it. After all, they did not have the time to set up a sealing array, nor did they have the ability to cut through the void to stop the Dragon Subduing General. If Ji Tianqing reached the true immortal realm, the Dragon Subduing General would not even have the chance to escape and would be killed. Swoosh! Swoosh! Ji Tianqing and Yunyao flew high in the sky toward the north. Their speed was similar, and they chased after the Dragon Subduing General from the left and right. 300 miles ahead, there was a streak of black light in the sky. It streaked across the sky like lightning, heading toward the north. There was a disk the size of a millstone in the black light. It was the Dragon Subduing General's life-saving divine artifact. That disk emitted a dark red glow and was surrounded by a mysterious black aura. It seemed to be able to travel through space. Every time it flashed, the disk could teleport more than 200 miles away. Speed was terrifyingly fast. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao flew with all their might to ensure that they would not be shaken off. However, the distance between them was slowly increasing. They were destined to not be able to catch up with the dragon-subduing general. Ji Tianqing's expression was serious. He sent a voice transmission to Yunyao. Yao Yao, this is not the way to go. We have to stop him as soon as possible. Only then will we have a chance to kill him. Yunyao nodded in agreement. She said in a low voice, the Heaven Punishers can travel through the void and travel between different worlds. I am worried that the dragon-subduing general will escape from the five-element world and enter the void. He has a divine artifact that can travel through the void, but we can't fly in the void for long periods of time. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and frowned. The five-element world has been sealed by the god spirits. Even if we break through the sky, we cannot enter the void. We will still be blocked by the golden light seal. With the dragon-subduing general's ability, he should not be able to break the golden light seal, right? His meaning was clear. General Fu Long shouldn't be able to escape from the five elements world. Yunyao also felt that it made sense. She nodded and said, all right, then let's join hands and use the Heaven Dragon capturing palm. Perhaps we can stop him. Ji Tianqing flew to Yunyao without hesitation and flew side by side with her. The two of them clenched their fists tightly as they tried their best to circulate the divine power in their bodies. At the same time, they cast the heaven-capturing dragon palm. Shua! Golden light blossomed from their bodies as they raised their other hand at the same time. Their 5 fingers stretched out in front of them. Immediately, 2 gigantic palms as large as mountains and shining with golden light flew towards the black disk at lightning speed. Back then, when Kenshin was guiding Luo Shui in her cultivation, he had imparted this ultimate skill to her. Yunyao had fused with Luo Shui's soul, so she naturally remembered this matter. At this critical juncture, it was the most appropriate move to use. 2 gigantic golden palms that blotted out the sky were about to grab the pitch-black disk from the left and right. At this moment, the dragon-subduing general finally reacted. Perhaps his injuries were too severe, and he didn't want to waste any more time. He just wanted to get rid of Ji Tianqing and Yunyao as soon as possible. Or perhaps it was the power of the heaven-capturing dragon palm that forced him to escape from the five-element world. He resolutely cast the forbidden divine power and didn't hesitate to sacrifice 2,000 years of his lifespan. He released surging divine power and infused it into the divine array of the disk. Instantly, the disk size expanded by 10 times. A circle of sharp sawtooth appeared on the edge of the disk as it shone with a dazzling red light. Shwa! The entire disk turned dark red like a huge fireball. With a crisp cracking sound, a huge gap was instantly torn open in the sky. With a flash of red light, the disk passed through the gap in space and entered the dark space. It was a stretch of void about 5,000 miles thick. At the edge was a huge and sturdy golden barrier. The dazzling golden barrier was the god seal that had been placed down since ancient times. This stretch of void about 5,000 miles wide was a vacuum zone. It was filled with pitch-black wind and dark red heavenly fire. Even martial gods didn't dare to stay in this area for too long. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger. As for martial sages, once they entered this area, they would most likely die. The experts of the martial world called this vacuum zone the heavenly wind and fire layer. This was the protective layer between the five-element world and the void. The creatures from the outside world had to first break through the golden barrier, then the heavenly wind and fire layer. Finally, they had to break through the space barrier before they could enter the five-element world. Shwa! The disk surrounded by flames shuttled rapidly through the heavenly wind and fire layer, heading straight for the golden barrier thousands of miles away. Along the way, there were dozens of whirlpools of astral winds that were wreaking havoc as they rushed over. However, the disk was very agile. It dodged left and right and actually dodged those whirlpools of wind. Apart from that, there were also dark red heavenly flames that covered the sky and earth. They poured down like a flood and drowned the round disk. But the disk's defense was extremely sturdy. It resisted the burning of the heavenly fire and rushed out unscathed. In comparison, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's situation wasn't so easy. Seeing General Dragon subduing enter the heavenly wind and fire layer, the two of them chased after him without hesitation. As soon as they entered the heavenly wind and fire layer, the two of them encountered extremely hot waves of heavenly fire. Yunyao relied on the defense of the dark gold divine armor to forcefully pass through the waves of heavenly fire and wasn't hurt. Ji Tianqing also unleashed his divine power and pushed the defense of his divine body to the maximum. The power of the thunder god's body and the heaven-connecting sword body were fully displayed at this moment. Even though he passed through the waves of heavenly fire, he was unharmed. However, as soon as the two of them passed through a few waves of heavenly fire, they were surrounded by more than 10 whirlpools of wind. The two of them dodged and teleported continuously. After expending a large amount of divine power and mental energy, they finally dodged the attacks of the whirlpools. Only then did they realize that General Dragon subduing had already escaped far away. The two of them were still 1,500 miles away from the Golden Barrier, but General Dragon subduing had already reached it. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's eyes narrowed, and their hearts were in their throats. The two of them prayed in their hearts, hoping that the Golden Barrier was strong enough to block General Dragon subduing. At the very least, it would be good if they could buy some time and let General Dragon subduing spend more time. As long as General Dragon subduing couldn't escape, the two of them had absolute confidence that they could kill General Dragon subduing here. However, their prayers didn't have any effect. The red light emitted from the disc was extremely dazzling. Its power was also pushed to the maximum, and it started to spin at an extraordinary speed. Crack! Boundless divine power exploded from the disc and crashed into the Golden Barrier. Instantly, a huge crack appeared on the Golden Barrier. Swoosh! Flames bloomed and golden light burst forth. The disc actually passed through the Golden Barrier and escaped into the void. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's eyes widened in anger. Anger and indignation surged in their hearts. However, it was already too late for them to stop it. Outside the Golden Barrier was the vast and boundless void. It was cold and dead. To General Dragon subduing, the boundless void was the sea, and he was the dragon that had escaped into the sky. End of chapter. Chapter 2490. Swoosh! The disc flickered with a red light, like a meteor streaking across the sky, and soon disappeared into the darkness. Inside the disc there was a dark alternate dimension. The dragon subduing general laid on a piece of barren land, completely exhausted. He panted heavily, and a look of joy appeared on his face as if he had just survived a calamity. It's not without reason that my race dominated the universe and swept through hundreds of worlds. Without the tether space disc, how could we travel through space and come and go as we please? General Dragon subduing muttered to himself, his lips curling into a smug sneer. However, the sneer at the corner of his mouth quickly disappeared, and his expression became gloomy. He struggled to open his eyes and sized up his body that was riddled with scars and broken into pieces. His eyes flashed with monstrous hatred. It's been close to 1,000 years since I've suffered such terrible injuries. I was so close to being split in half and turned into minced meat. Ji Tianqing, that bastard, and Yunyao, that bitch. I'll remember this. I'll make a comeback very soon, trample on you, and kill you thousands of times. General Dragon subduing roared with hatred. His voice was hoarse and weak. His injuries were too severe. In order to use the tether space disc to escape, he had used a forbidden ability. Now the power of the ability had dissipated, and he had suffered a backlash. Not only did he lose consciousness, but his body was also collapsing. His power had completely dissipated. He fell into a state of unconsciousness, like a pile of lifeless rotten meat, quietly lying on the wasteland. However, the tether space disc's divine formation was automatically activated, driving the disc to continue flying into the depths of the void. When Ji Tianqing and Yunyao passed through the heavenly wind and fire layer and reached the golden light barrier, it was already too late. The tether space disc had already passed through the gap and entered the vast void. The 100 feet long gap in the golden light barrier was quickly healing. Ji Tianqing instinctively flew toward that gap, wanting to enter the void and continue chasing after General Dragon subduing. However, Yun Yao pulled him back and dissuaded him with a serious expression. Tianqing, forget it. The dragon-subduing general's divine weapon was clearly able to traverse through space. It was a divine weapon that was specially used to save one's life and escape. You entered the void with your physical body. How could you possibly catch up to him? Ji Tianqing also understood this point. He even thought that if he chased too far, he would not be able to return to the five elements world if he used up too much of his divine power. However, he was still unwilling to give up. There was a ball of fire burning in his chest. Damn it! We can only blame ourselves for not having a powerful divine artifact. Otherwise, we would be able to keep him here. Yun Yao understood his feelings. She comforted him with a gentle expression. Forget it. In the five elements world, how can there be any powerful divine weapon? Although we weren't able to kill the dragon-subduing general, we severely injured him and forced him to flee. In the short term, he definitely wouldn't dare to return. Moreover, if General Fulong escaped, the Heaven Punisher's invasion plan would be ruined. We have to make the best use of our time to eliminate the remaining Heaven Punisher warriors. Ji Tianqing suppressed his anger and unwillingness and nodded. That's right. There should be close to 2,000 surviving Heaven Punishers. They are scattered across the territories of the Tianju and Luoshui divine kingdoms, and there are also some within Tianju Mountain and the 72 cities. We have to surround and eliminate them as soon as possible. We cannot let them escape. The Xunwu continent is too vast, and those warriors are all martial saints. If they hide, there will be endless trouble in the future. That's right. Only by eliminating those Heaven Punishers can the crisis be truly resolved. Yun Yao nodded in agreement. The two did not waste any more time. They passed through the astral wind and fire layer and flew back. By the time they left the astral wind and fire layer and returned to the five elements world, the gap in the golden barrier had already closed. The giant spatial crack in the sky was also mending at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao flew south, and along the way, they encountered a dozen or so black-armored warriors who were fleeing in panic. Naturally, the two of them unleashed their divine abilities and killed those warriors in an instant. Not long after, the two of them returned to the vicinity of Luoshan Mountain. The once sacred and majestic Luoshan Mountain had now been reduced to ruins and no longer existed. Its fate had been the same as Tianju Mountains. The two of them waited in the ruins for a while before Jiku and Martial God Taihao returned. Seeing that the two of them were safe and sound, Jiku and Taihao looked relieved and hurriedly asked about the situation. Big brother Tianqing, senior sister. It's good that you're fine. Where's General Long Fu? Senior, is General Long Fu dead? Was he killed by you? Faced with their expectant gazes, Ji Tianqing calmly shook his head and explained, Unfortunately, we were unable to capture him. Although he was heavily injured, he had a life-saving artifact and escaped from the five elements world into the void. Ah, so that's what happened? Jiku revealed a regretful expression and frowned. Taihao also frowned and said worriedly, What should we do? Now that General Long Fu has escaped with heavy injuries, he will definitely come back to seek revenge. If he comes back with a large group of experts, how will we stop him? Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a solemn expression, There will be a way when the car reaches the mountain, and the boat will cross the bridge when the boat reaches the bridge. It's useless to worry now. The most important thing now is to eliminate the remaining Heaven Punisher soldiers as soon as possible. Jiku and Taihao both understood that the Heaven Punisher soldiers were all martial sages. 2 or 3 of them were enough to cause chaos in an empire and were extremely dangerous. Therefore, the two of them looked at Ji Tianqing and listened to his arrangements. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and ordered Taihao, Lead your divine guards to the heavens and divine nation, and exterminate the Heaven Punisher warriors. Also, mobilize your scouts to monitor the entire continent and grasp the movements of the Heaven Punisher soldiers. Martial God Taihao understood his intentions and hurriedly cupped his fists and bowed, saying, Taihao understands. Farewell. After bowing, he did not waste any time and hurriedly turned to leave to carry out his mission. Ji Tianqing looked at Jiku and Yun Yao and said, Yao Yao Kuku. The two of you stay in the Luoshui divine kingdom, and eliminate the remaining Heaven Punisher soldiers. After this matter is over, quickly restore the rule of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom, and maintain the peace and stability of the Divine Kingdom. Hearing him say this, Jiku and Yunyao guessed that he was definitely going to act alone and leave for a period of time. The two of them asked in unison, Tianqing, where are you going? Big brother Tianqing, are you going to act alone again? Ji Tianqing did not hide it and nodded, saying, that's right. I'm going to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and the 72 cities to eliminate the Heaven Punisher soldiers. Also, I'm going to the North Underworld Mountain to completely eliminate the threat. Completely eliminate the threat? Big brother Tianqing, are you going to completely eliminate the demon race? The two women were stunned for a moment and revealed looks of disbelief. Ji Tianqing's expression was cold as he said solemnly, that's right. There are good and bad people in every race on the continent. Only the demon race is an exception. None of them are good people. The demon race's body, blood, and soul are filled with slaughter, war, and plunder. They do not deserve to live in this world. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.